All right. If you are watching this after the fact, later on, I'll put the timestamp where the show starts in the description. Otherwise, we're just going to hang for a second and let people come in. I'm going to take my own YouTube link. Gotta find that link. Nice. One watching. It's just me. I'm watching my own show. How's it going, Owen? Oh, it's going good, man. It's going good. It's been a crazy day. Crazy week going on. A lot of stuff happening, but I'm happy to be here. Nice. That's cool, man. That's great. I'm going to post the link on Twitter. 7 people watching now. Boom. Perfect. All right. I'm going to post the link on Twitter. If you've been here before, you know the deal. We'll hang for 6 minutes, probably 5 minutes actually. I want to get this going. I'm amped. I'm feeling the energy. And then we'll get going. It should be pretty cool. Okay. Got the picture. I got to write the description. I should have wrote it beforehand, but I didn't. Kind of wanted to come up with a clever title, but it was also 6:59, so I was like, oh my god, I gotta go. But I was thinking like ornithology, is that what it's called? Ornithology, when you study birds, 'cause we have birds, baker, bread. Thought I could have come up with a good title, but I didn't. Boom. I tweeted it. Are people here yet? Yeah. What's up? Nice. Everyone's here. This is it. I should just lock it. If I could just lock the channel and the 5 of us, the 6 of us, however many people are here, we could just do the whole show, just us. All right, I'm closing windows. How you guys doing? I'm moving stuff around so I can see the chat. Bell gang. Cool. I think I got this all set up. Oh, I'm blocking the light. I was looking at my screen. I was like, damn, there's not a lot of light, but I was blocking it. Cool. Perfect. Nice. We have intergenerational rivalry in the chat. People say Zoomers are based. People do say that. They say that quite a bit, don't they? All right, cool. All right, I'm gonna throw on my gloves. It's funny, like getting ready for things just in general, like for so long. I mean, I'm sure you guys have jobs or like have had them, you know, but just like getting ready and having to be like ready to go at like a certain point has really made me like consider like the really weird and like fluid nature of time, honestly, after like all these years. Like one minute you're like, oh, I have 30 minutes to get ready. Like, wow, I have so much time. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I don't have enough time at all. It's like there's a snap moment where the time just like slips away. I got my brushes, making sure I got everything. I got to grab the paint. And we're going to do this. Boom. This one should be cool. It's been a busy week in the studio. I haven't been cramming as many crazy videos into my head as usual. Normally I'm like binging on some like particular crazy topic on YouTube, but I've just been working a lot. Just been having to chill a little bit on that. It's kind of hard to like sate that like urge in my brain at this point now. I've gone like so hard on like so many weird and like ridiculous topics. What time are we at? 7:06? Yeah, let's wait a minute or two. It's hot as shit out here. Yeah, dude, it's so hot where I'm at. Oh, it's so hot. My AC wasn't working for a few days. It was kind of like refreshing though in a way to like be forced to like confront the heat. But if I didn't know the AC guy was coming, it would have been an issue. Do I also paint with watercolors sometimes? Yeah, I do. Well, the thing is that the paints that I use are opaque watercolors. So it's like if I want to get that watercolor vibe going, I can just loosen up the way I'm using the paint. So actually not really. For me, it's like there's no real reason for me to buy watercolors, because if the paint I'm using could function as watercolors, then I'm not going to get the watercolors which can't function this way. It's like, like all bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. So if I got one thing that can go both ways. Should have a better metaphor there, but I don't. Anyway, what else I got going on? I launched up those prints on Sunday night, and they sold out pretty quickly. That was really sick. I got like a bunch of those on my floor right now, ready to ship out. I got some stickers coming in. If you guys didn't see, check this out. Oh, it looks sick on the video. Yeah, check this out. It looks dope. Wow, the video really heightens the holographic effect, although it actually does look like this in real life. I'm getting like 50 more of these sent to my studio. The reason I only dropped 22 of the prints on Sunday was that I got a bunch of these, but like 40 of them had like these defects, and then I only had 10 here, so I only had 22 good ones. Wow, how visually pleasing is that? Dude, cancel the show. We're just gonna like look at this for like 40 minutes right now. But yeah, Say No Dealo of Clooney. I really like him. Patron saint of people in purgatory. Also, I didn't put this on Twitter, so I guess inside info if you care. But also the patron saint of people with jaundice. I couldn't figure out why that was. I like did a lot of digging. If anyone finds out why, then you get bonus points on the show. I'll make you a mod in the chat, because I couldn't figure out why. But I had jaundice a long time ago, and it sort of correlates with this medical thing I have, so made a sticker of him. But also he's patron saint of souls in purgatory. He's also the guy that got All Saints Day started, All Souls Day started. It was like his idea. He was like, there's some story where he's like sitting around and he's like, yeah, why don't we have a day where we pray for like all the souls at once? And then that became All Souls Day. So pretty cool. Man, I'm itching to just get started. It's 7:08. Let's wait like 30 more seconds. What else I got going down? I should like have a stack of just like cool visual material to show you guys going on over here. Been working on some ink drawings. That's what's going on. I'm in this weird state where I have like my catapult in the studio like loaded up fully with a bunch of crazy stuff that I want to show people, but I can't add new products to my shop until like Corona dies down. So like I have all this stuff like nuclear weaponry ready to go, and I can't unleash it. I'm like freaking the president in World War II, and I'm trying to smash the drop the nuclear bomb button, and the coronavirus is like, no, you can't, you have to wait. And I'm like, I'm freaking gonna nuke the ocular receptors of the people on Twitter. I have this image of, I don't even know what I should say. I got this image of a saint that people are really going to like. I got a bunch of stuff. Now I'm cooking new stuff. So I'm cooking new stuff. The old stuff is sitting on the shelf ready to go. It's a brutal time right now. But actually, I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I'm about to order like 40 or like 80 frames tomorrow from this one guy. So it should be a good time. All right. Did you enjoy our casual intro? Have I sated your desire for casual, artistic, studio-based small talk? Because it's time. It's 7:09. We are going to do this. I'm going to click the right button. I clicked the right button a few weeks in a row. And we're going to do it right now. Ready? Are you ready? I'm ready. Let's go. All right, and we're back. Someone said it sounds like my mic is clipping. That means it's too loud. I think you're right. I got a new mic, so it's like extra high quality, so maybe I need to chill a little bit. I turned the gain down. Obviously, I used to be in a punk band, so I turned the gain all the way up on the mic, and I listened to it on Audacity, and I was like, yeah, it's fine. Let's do it. I'm also probably louder when I know that people are listening, so if it's clipping, which I think that means it's going too loud, let me know. Otherwise, we'll just roll with it. Yeah, I got a new mic. All right, let's do this. How you guys doing? It's good to have you here on a Tuesday night. I'm ready to get some painting going on, get some art going on, get some interesting discussion going on. It's been a pretty interesting week here. I've been kind of like swamped with work again, but it's all good. And like you just heard me talk about in the intro, I got a lot of projects to launch. We'll probably talk about that. Intro music, Painted Worlds on Spotify. Painted Worlds, check it out. He's cool. He retweeted my show link before. I didn't ask him to, but he did. That's what you do for your friends sometimes, I guess. So, little intro. Yeah, it's going to be a cool show because, you know, I'm kind of balancing. I like to do the sort of meta discussion of the show also. I'm sort of balancing, you know, how to like host the show, because sometimes I have like a whole, like literally like a list like written out, and I'm looking at the list and it's almost like I'm doing like a monologue, and I'm like, oh, I got to hit these topics and stuff. Sometimes it's more organic and I'm just kind of like riffing with you guys, talking to you guys, and like keeping my eyes on the chat and stuff. So I'm kind of feeling it out. And also it's interesting how the show kind of dovetails with what I've been thinking about and doing like every week, you know. Normally during the week I am getting like obsessed with like particular topics. I think that's part of why I gravitated towards Twitter initially. Like I'm always, you know, it's almost like my brain is this thing that needs to be entertained. So I'm always seeking out, you know, new fruits in the informational jungle to squeeze. And once that fruit is dry, I move on and squeeze another fruit. So it's not that much more effort for me to like tweet about it and post about it. And I'm always like into something that I find interesting. I don't know how you guys are, but I'm always into something that I find interesting. And over the last like 2 weeks, I've been thinking a lot about things that relate to the show in an interesting way. I've been thinking about like narrative and time and other creative works and things like that. So we'll probably end up talking about that, but I still want to keep the content grounded in what we're looking at here. And if you've been watching the show for the last few weeks, what we've been hitting is visions from the Bible, and that has been really awesome. It's been a really, really good time, actually. So we've hit so many different ones. Daniel, I mean, we hit like a bunch of them. I don't even have a list right now, but that's like all I've been doing for like weeks. And I was sitting down today and last night, and I was thinking about what I was going to do the show on. And I was looking at more visions and stuff, and I feel like in the show, one thing I have learned is like whenever I feel like I've landed in a safe spot and I'm planning out the show and I'm like, oh cool, we'll just like do that again. I don't really like to like land in that space, because then it's kind of like not dead, but you know, it's kind of like, yeah, we did that already, and we're just kind of again like squeezing the same fruit. But I also like that we have this kind of continuous thread running through it. So I was looking around and I was like, I want to keep doing visions, but I don't want to feel like I can see virtually what's going to happen before we do it. I want it to be somewhat spontaneous. And there is a cousin to visions in the Bible. There is a relative, maybe even closer than a cousin, maybe like a younger sister, an older brother, some close relative to visions in the Bible. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, which is dreams. And that's kind of an interesting topic for me. Before we hop into these books, I got some books right here I want to show you guys. I got a really cool one on deck, actually. But for me, it's interesting because I've always been into art, obviously, and mystical things and things like that. And dreams always, I don't know what your reaction is to that when you hear that, but for me, for a really long time, my reaction was like, ugh, dreams, like, okay, like, here we go, buddy. Like, I don't really know why that is. I thought about it a lot. I think maybe it's because for a lot of artists, at the time, I kind of saw it as like a cop-out of like, oh yeah, it's like a foggy painting of like a bunch of weird symbols and it's from one of your dreams. Like, all right, cool. Like, I don't know. That's kind of just the reaction I had for a really, really long time. And I never had dreams for a really long time. That's a side effect of like literally smoking weed like 24/7, which I mean in like the way that I was a loser. I'm not trying to make it sound cool. I didn't have any dreams probably for like 10 years actually. And drinking and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting because I was like this hyper mystical guy, but I never had dreams. And that's most people's intersection with like the unseen realm. So I was kind of like cut off from it. Maybe that's something to do with like leaning on psychedelics to like access the unseen realm. There's probably a lot of like Jungian psychology or just like normal psychology to unpack there, but I'm not going to do it right now. So I really didn't care about dreams at all. I think they were cool at all. But it's really only that I've been going deeper into like the theological view of the universe and Christianity, and really like changing my view over the last like many years to living in a world where God is infused with like everything just by virtue of like living in a universe that God like created and somewhat stewards. That I kind of came around to dreams, and I was like, oh yeah, actually dreams are kind of cool actually. So I'm stoked to like dig into that a little bit. It kind of goes with visions. The dreams in the Bible are visionary, but I'm actually kind of curious. When I'm looking at the chat more, we can talk about it, but I'm kind of curious what you guys feel, because I feel like dreams are on the one hand like this natural, mystical, prophetic, insight into the subconscious thing we get, but I can't also shake this feeling of like, ugh, yeah, dreams, like we get it. Like, I don't know, everyone's been at this party where someone's telling a story about a dream they had, and you're kind of just like, okay, Like, all right, yeah, it's crazy. You were driving like a bus that was a cat, and then you went to like the amusement park, like whatever. So I want to hit a few dreams. I don't know if we're going to hit a few, but today, keeping in line with the visions of the Bible theme that we have for season 2, we're going to hit one in particular. And let's just jump right in. Keeping with also the themes of the show, I've been looking at a weird book as the intro and just showing you guys a book. Normally it's kind of like an aesthetic object, but this book relates to what I want to talk about right now. So I got this really cool book here. It's super awesome. It's called, I've been saying Iconostasis. I'm told it's Iconostasis. I actually posted a meme on Twitter based on that exact thing, which is, yeah, I just read these words in like my bedroom alone. Like I don't know how to say any of them. Like, sorry. But yeah, so in case you don't know, I'm probably about to butcher a bunch of like Eastern European and Russian words. So I mean, we can just deal with it. Sorry to everyone that lives east of like a certain line from like Christendom over. But it's called Iconostasis by Pavel Florensky. It's a really, really, really cool book. A little bit out of my element right now, but the iconostasis in my studies, what I have gleaned, is that it's the wall. If you've been to an Orthodox church before, if you haven't, even if you're not Orthodox, by the way, you should really check it out. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show too, but the Orthodox church, like aesthetic visual situation is just like, dude, it's so out of control. And I mean, I didn't really get it until I went to one. I think that's like the cliche thing everyone says, but you really got to go to one. They're really, really, really insane. Even the more like humble looking ones on the outside, like the sense of the aesthetic there is just, man, it's really next level. So they have this, they call it a screen, but it's not really a screen. I would call it, in my naivete stumbling in, I would call it a wall. It's like a wall painted with icons that separates like the most sacred little nave of the church from the temple space that everyone else is in. So you're all in this like room, and it's cut off via this wall. Anyone Orthodox probably thinks I sound stupid, but I don't know. I'm just telling you what I picked up. And there's this wall, and it separates you from like the most sacred space. And that wall is covered with these huge icons, and it's called the iconostasis. That's what I picked up. Don't tell other people that unless you look into it, because I could be totally wrong. But that's what I picked up from it. So this is a really cool book because this guy Pavel Florensky, and I really highly recommend picking this up. Long story short, I didn't anticipate telling his life story, so I'm not going to. But basically, he was this guy who was really, really, really intelligent, into science and all these different topics and stuff. And he tried to become a priest in the book. They talk about his life story. And one of the spiritual fathers kind of like, not turned him away, but he was like, look, this really isn't your calling. Like, you're supposed to do something else. So he becomes this like really well-educated person teaching about, science and things like that. And it's right at the time in Russia where the communists take over. And he's this really like, honestly, like badass dude who goes to teach these science classes, but he's in the robes of a priest still. So he's kind of like flaunting the authorities. Like, yeah, I'm a believer. Like, what are you going to do about it? Because you need me to like teach these topics that only I am like equipped to teach, basically. And no one really knew what to do with him. And then eventually he gets sent to some like starvation camp and he dies. I'm pretty sure he dies there, unfortunately. I mean, that's really sad. But this book is a book he wrote before going, obviously, that is like his complete view of art. And it's really, really cool. And the whole book kind of revolves around this visual metaphor of the iconostasis. So it's really awesome. Honestly, we could do like literally like dozens of shows about this. It's one of those books where like it seems really thin, but it's so dense and visually, and informationally rich that like you read a few pages and you're like, whoa, I gotta like chill out actually. So it's really awesome. And I thought of it because one of the things he talks about a lot in here is dreams. Actually, I should have pulled up his name. I have it on my phone, but I'm going to pull it up right now because someone recommended me this book on Twitter and I just want to make sure I shout them out. I forgot his username. I feel like it's like Mystical Lizard. Is it literally? It's Lucky Lizard 7777 was pressuring me to read this book for a really long time, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. And then I finally did, and I was like, wow, it was totally worth it. So shout out to him. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much before painting, but it's definitely worth like explicating this if we're going to jump into the dream thing because he has a really, really cool view on it. In as short a nutshell as possible, basically what he says is he uses this psychological phenomenon that's really interesting that probably most people know, but maybe we don't have like a term for. There's actually a Dali painting about this, but maybe you guys are familiar with the phenomenon of like you're having a dream and all of a sudden like you hear like a chainsaw or something and it wakes you up, but when you wake up you realize that the chainsaw was just a lawnmower that's outside. Our brains take in like external stimuli and then incorporate them into the dream. So what he uses as a jumping off point to talk about dreams in this book is that he says that some people have, let's say he uses an example where you'll have like this crazy long dream where you're in the French Revolution and you're a soldier and you get caught and you're going to get guillotined, and you walk up to the guillotine, and right when the guillotine's coming down and it chops you on your neck, that's when this guy wakes up, and then it's his bedpost falling on his neck, and his neck gets hit at the moment that he gets the guillotine in the dream. So he uses a few examples like that. And he's like, yeah, that's interesting, right? Of course, like from a psychological perspective. But what's really interesting is that it reveals in the dream space that things are built backwards in terms of causality. So in the dream, it's like the time in the dream is backwards, and that bedpost fell on that guy's neck, and that was the stimuli from which the whole dream of the French Revolution was built backwards in causality, but he experienced it via the flow of normal time that we experience in everyday life. So if that makes sense, like it's A, B, and C, you experience the dream as A, B, and C, but the C is what it's built backwards from. So the C is like the seed of where the dream intersects with reality, and it's built backwards from there. And I thought that was really interesting, man, because we'll talk more about dreams later, but that kind of is how I feel like dreams are built in general. Even if you take out the trippy kind of like reverse time element, I always feel like the kind of feeling that you get in a dream is what the dream starts from, and then the symbols and people you're talking to and how you experience that situation is built backwards from that feeling. So I really like that idea of like dreams as like, experiencing like causality backwards, and he explains it in a few like really cool ways. So I just want to read like a page or two of this book before we jump in. And so dreams are the images that separate the visible world from the invisible, and at the same time join them. This boundary space of the dream establishes the relationship of the dream images to this world as well as to that world. From the perspective of the visible world and its ordinary images, a dream is merely a dream. Nothing. Yes, just nothing, basically. I'm paraphrasing what he's saying here, so I don't spend like 10 minutes reading all this. But in the dream time, its most general characteristic runs reversely to time in the visible world. And therefore, although it's something perceived, the dream is wholly teleological. It's built backwards from this like teleological endpoint, saturated with the meanings of the invisible world, meanings that are invisible, immaterial, eternal, yet nevertheless visibly manifest. So he says, this is what I was building up to. A dream is therefore pure meaning wrapped in the thinnest membrane of materiality. I really like that visual where it's like pure meaning just wrapped in this thin layer of like the phenomenal world that we like are forced to experiencing things via. And basically says, where like the higher realms kind of like dense up and come down and touch the realm that we live in, that's where the dream is. And he goes on, I'm not going to actually read this whole thing because it's kind of long. I mean, it's really cool. But basically what he says is, most people think of the dream as a movement between two realms, but what he really describes it as, it's a space where those two realms meet. And rather than being like, yeah, you're on this shore and you take a boat and go to the other shore and come back, it's not that the other shore is the dream. The dreaming is like the transition kind of like between those two worlds. Maybe that's a little bit subtle, but I thought that was a really cool point. There's a lot of cool stuff in here we'll probably talk about. Look at this. You're telling me you're not going to get this book? Spiritual Sobriety and the Iconic Face. Come on. This rules. This book rules. That ends the plug and introduction to dreams and stuff from him. But it's a really awesome book. It's a really cool book. Okay. So, why did I just go through all that? Because we're going to illustrate a dream today, talk about some symbols and things like that. And the dream we are hitting, I got the classic KJV out here today. I got a few other Bibles. I think we've been mixing it up every week so far. And there's a dream I wanted to hit. It was a pretty simple image, but oftentimes when I'm getting the show ready, I try and find an image that's kind of like meaty in terms of its symbolism, while also being, quote unquote, simple enough to actually paint in like the time frame allotted to us. And I was going through all the dreams in the Bible, and one really struck me. If you're not familiar with the Bible at all, you may even know the character of Joseph in Genesis. So we were in Revelation before. Now we've gone all the way back to the beginning. And Joseph is a really interesting character in the Bible because it's kind of like a type for Jesus in many ways. He's like persecuted and, all this different stuff happens to him basically. And it's used as like a type for Jesus, cast back into Genesis for a variety of reasons. And during his, he also has a unique relationship to dreams, by the way. He actually ends up interpreting one of Pharaoh's dreams that, saves the whole kind of Egyptian nation from starving. So he has a unique relationship to dream interpretation. It plays into his story a lot. And the one image that struck me here was, so it's in Genesis 40. And basically, long story short, I've kind of been looking at books for a while. I want to get into painting. But Genesis 40, butler, in some books it's cupbearer, so the butler, cupbearer, and a baker have offended the Pharaoh. Pharaoh throws him in jail. It's the same jail where Joseph is, and they have these dreams. And then he wakes up. They all wake up, and Joseph's like, hey, I can tell something's bothering you guys. And they say, yeah, we had these dreams, but no one is here to interpret them. And Joseph says, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them. And he's basically like, well, we'll interpret them right now. So the cupbearer's dream is basically there's this vine, and it brings forth these grapes, and he puts these grapes in like Pharaoh's cup. And Joseph says, yeah, that's great. That means that you're going to get released from jail, and you're going to fall back into favor with Pharaoh. It's going to be a great time for you. But here's the image that really struck me, because I thought it was so odd, honestly. I thought it was a really weird image, so I wanted to paint it with you guys right now. It says the baker then tells him the dream. And it's kind of funny, too, because the cupbearer says the dream, and Joseph's like, that's great. You're going to get out of jail. It's going to be a great time for you. And then the baker tells him his dream. And the baker says, okay, great. So now my turn. I also was in a dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of bake meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. So he dreams that he has these 3 baskets on his head, and the baskets are full of these like delicious baked goods. And then birds come and eat them. It's kind of a strange image that I would probably draw anyway, even if it wasn't in the Bible. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and he shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And then it happens. And 3 days later, it's Pharaoh's birthday, and kind of a weird note there. And the cupbearer gets reinstated as the butler. He becomes the butler again, and the baker gets killed and hung from a tree, and then birds eat him. And that's it. I mean, it keeps going, but that's it for our little story right here. And I thought it was so interesting. I mean, we'll talk about it, but I just felt like there was so much to unpack in that like little symbolic narrative. I was kind of proud of myself because in one way I was like, oh, it's interesting because we have Joseph, who is like this type for Christ in Genesis, and then we have these 2 figures, and one of them is exalted, and one of them dies and like kind of succumbs basically. And I was like, it's interesting. It's kind of like an inversion of the 2 thieves that Christ is crucified between, because the cupbearer is saved basically, but then he forgets about Joseph, so he's probably not really that great of a guy. He like gets saved, and Joseph tells him the dream, and then he gets out of prison, and he totally forgets about him for like multiple years. Whereas the baker seems like kind of a cool guy, I guess, gets killed, and that's all we hear of him. So it's kind of a parallel with like the 2 thieves in Jesus. And then when I was looking up commentary on this chapter, it said that in there also. John Chrysostom talked about that, which I thought was pretty cool, and so did George Leo Haydick. So I thought that was pretty cool, and we'll talk about it, like I said, as we go along, but I thought it was interesting, birds, and then the bread, and there's also obviously something there with, like, the baker is in prison for 3 days, right, 3 days being, like, a super symbolic thing, and then these birds come and eat the bread, and, like, the Eucharist, like, eating bread after 3 days, in prison, sort of entombed in this prison, so I thought it was pretty awesome, and I thought there was a lot we could talk about there and unpack there, so that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to illustrate the baker's dream from Genesis. Baker's Dozen, Baker's Dream. I didn't come up with a great title for this show, so that's up to you guys. And I just want to get it going. So I'm going to keep my eye on the chat. As you guys know, in case it's your first time here, like Isidore did all the way back, you have to put @Owen Cyclops. Otherwise, I'm definitely not going to see it. But I am interested kind of because also like I have my own view on dreams that I feel like is very kind of like cemented. But I also kind of want to hear what you guys think actually. So maybe I'll look at the chat a little bit more this show than I normally do. So let's get it going. I'm just going to start painting in right now. We can get to talking and stuff. I think also probably part of the reason that I got interested in this topic a little bit, I don't want you to think like every show from now on is going to be like Dreams World, but maybe this episode will be, is that my own dreams I feel like are very clearly separated. I think I've talked about this once before on the show, but I feel like they're very clearly separated from random, meaningless detritus of the day versus things that are obviously spiritually significant. And I do feel like I've gotten some like messages in my own dreams, whether they're, from my quote unquote subconscious or whether they're like theological in origin, I suppose could be debated. But basically what I'm thinking for this picture right now, so in case you haven't seen any of my art before, maybe subconsciously part of the reason why I gravitated towards this also is that I really like putting things on people's heads in artwork. I don't know why. When I draw like avatars and things like that, I love doing it. I can't really say why. I think it's just like a funny image. So what I want to get going is is there anything on this brush? No. So I want to have like the baker's head down here, and I want you to be able to see his eyes, his nose, maybe like a little mustache, his ears too in here. And then I'm going to get these baskets in. 1, 2, 3 kind of nested in each other. We're going to have like a little lump of like baked goods and stuff like that in there. And then I want to get these birds in. I want to use certain like symbolic birds. I think that would be pretty cool too. So bread, birds, got lots of different Christian symbolism stuff going on. And also, even if this is the only dream episode, I feel like we have a lot to unpack there. I hate using that term because it sounds so like social justice, like academic, like, oh, there's a lot to unpack there. But like literally, there actually is a lot to unpack there. So whatever. And I never usually mention this, maybe I do sometimes, but first decision is often the most powerful because right off the bat, I have to decide what color I'm using for the lines. And that really affects the whole picture. I definitely don't want to use black. We've been using indigo for a really long time. I kind of want to push it. I want to keep pushing the visual situation forward. I want to keep us moving along. So we're going to do something a little bit different. I want to use this Venetian red for the lines. So we'll start out, I'll paint the baker in Venetian red. That's also kind of cool because he'll be at the bottom, and then I feel like maybe if he's in this like hyper reddish brown color, it'll kind of not push him into the background, but maybe it'll kind of signal that he's not like aggressively like the focus of the image in a way. And I'm already anticipating, the colors and stuff I want to do. It's kind of interesting because the scripture says the baskets are white. I don't really want to paint them white, to be honest with you. Maybe I'll use a really, really light tan. I can't imagine that the baskets were pure, like marble platinum white. Maybe they were, maybe not. But we'll see. Cool. And someone asked me something in the chat. What do I think about lucid dreaming? Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really anticipate us talking about that, but yeah, it definitely is something that's related to dreaming and stuff like that. I have a little experience with lucid dreaming. I have done it before. All right, so I'm going to paint in this guy's head. I want to make sure it's not too high up because I want to make sure I leave room for these like really cool looking birds that are going to be like coming in and eating the bread. So I'm just going to kind of go for it. I want to go a little bit looser with this one maybe. Cool. Perfect head shape for an Egyptian baker in the Old Testament. Perfect. And I'm just going to paint in his features and everything too in this red. I'll paint in his eyes and nose and stuff. So yeah, lucid dreaming is interesting. Some people that are into more of like the theological side of things say it's bad because, or even just like the Jungian side of things. That's really where I would hear this from, I guess. But they say it's bad because you're supposed to be getting messages from your subconscious in your dreams, and if you start like playing around with it too much, then it's kind of like you're going to interrupt like the phone calls you're supposed to get. That is pretty compelling, honestly. Once I started having dreams that obviously had like a spiritual significance to me, I was thinking, would I really mess with lucid dreaming after that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it is pretty cool. My only experience of it, honestly, is myself doing it randomly when I was traveling. And then it's a really, really big thing in Tibetan Buddhism, I can say for sure. There are crazy stories of like translators who work translating texts all day. And then at night when they go to sleep, they lucid dream and then they like meditate or do other work while they're sleeping. So that's pretty nuts. I can't say I'm not jealous of that, obviously, because that does sound pretty awesome. On my own, though, I have done it a little bit. The hardest part is not waking up. There are actually techniques and stuff you can use for not waking up. There's a cool book I have on my shelf by this Tibetan guy that's all about lucid dreaming, actually. Had a dream that a rotting corpse with bloodshot eyes wearing vestments was smiling upon me. That's really creepy, like a dead priest. Can't say, man. The thing about interpreting dreams, that's really... So I'm just going to throw some hair in on this guy. I'm just going to use Venetian red. Let's just go for it. The interesting thing about dreams is that when you work with like Jungian people, like people that are actually like Jungian scholars or Jungian psychologists and stuff like that, for the most part it's funny because, I used to be with like I can't really say where. I used to be with like a group of people that would often be doing dream interpretation for people. It's kind of weird. But that's what the case was. And it's funny because you get like a Jungian psychologist and it's like really hyped up in your mind because you're like, wow, like this person, and I'm not even saying they don't know what they're talking about, but in your mind you're like, wow, like I'm going to tell this person my dream and they're going to tell me what's going on. It's going to be so awesome. And then you finally get to meet with them. And what happens to everyone is they're like, oh, cool, so you're going to tell me what my dream means? And then the Jungian psychologist is like, no, I can't do that actually. Only you can tell you what your dreams mean, because I suppose in some schools of Jungian like dream interpretation, and this makes sense actually, like the symbols in your dreams, I mean, unless you hit something like super archetypal, are specific to you. I mean, if you had like a Godzilla toy when you were 6 years old, and you dream about a Godzilla toy and you got that toy, right before your uncle died or something, no one else is going to be able to tell you that, right? Obviously. So that's pretty interesting. So it's kind of hard to deduce what like other people's dream means, basically. Could be a demon priest. Yeah, when people have dreams of like demonic stuff, it is pretty interesting. For me, okay, so I'm just gonna let's keep this moving. We're just gonna go. I think what I'm gonna do with the baskets is I'm going to use a different color brown, and then I'm going to put in some like weaving and stuff like that. I do want to dig into like some symbolism of the baskets. That sounds weird, but I actually do want to do it. But I want to make sure I keep us moving. We looked at the books for like, 15 minutes already, so let's get some painting going and then we'll go back. It's kind of a call here I have to make if I want to go like hard dark brown on the baskets or light brown. I'm worried the light brown won't really be enough contrast. Since I know that I'm going to put in these black birds around the outside, and I know it's going to be really, really, really high contrast with the black birds. I got a few different black birds lined up, actually, so get excited. I'm going to go high contrast. I'm going to use burnt umber. This is a very like dark wood, dark chocolatey kind of brown. So that's going to set us up, and I'll paint these baskets in, and it'll take a minute for me to paint the weave in on them so we can get to talking about some cool stuff. Christian perspective, lucid dreaming is dangerous because you're basically undefended in your sleep. Yeah, a lot of people have said that. There's even some Orthodox stuff that I've seen that's about like being very, very distrustful of your dreams, and that you basically like, I don't want to like caricature a position and make it sound like unwise, because I'm sure it's like well thought out, but basically I've heard people talk about like, you should basically just like kind of ignore them. There's some really interesting stories. Some people sent me them on Twitter actually, where like some monk or someone had a dream about like Jewish people, and he like interpreted this dream in a really weird way, and then he went off and like became Jewish, and that story was used as like a warning, like, hey, don't read like too much into your dreams, which I thought was really funny. Not funny as in unwise, it's just an objectively like humorous story. Okay, so this first basket, I know I'm gonna have some black birds perched on the edge of the basket, so I want to leave enough room to put them in. So I'm just gonna kind of go for it and paint in top of the basket line right there. It's pretty good. I feel pretty good about that line. Okay, I'm going to throw in the bottoms of the basket here. I'll lead us off with a kind of a crazy story about dreams. Normally I don't like talking about dreams for the whole reason that I said in the beginning, where it's like, oh cool, dreams, like whatever, dude. Like maybe that's just my reaction, not your guys, but I will if we're doing an episode on it. So I met this guy one time. He was really weird. Not weird in a good way, like, we all are. And he told me this crazy story. Check this out. This is some real weird, like, folk theological esoterica. So this guy, I don't know if he would describe himself as Christian. He was definitely like a mystical and like theologically inclined guy. I think he kind of like thought Christianity was true, but maybe never really like got into it. I don't know. It's kind of just the vibe I got from him to set up the story. I'm going to paint the other 3 tiers of baskets here while I'm telling this really awesome story. And for some reason, he was talking to someone else. The kind of guy who like kind of entertains anything in a good way. And the guy told him I'm going to give my friend a fake name, my friend Frank. So this guy told Frank that he should try praying to Yahweh, specifically. That he should name Yahweh and pray to Yahweh instead of praying to, just God or like some other entity or something. That he should say Yahweh and pray to Yahweh. So he did that. And then my friend Frank had this really weird dream that he told me about, and it really creeped me out a lot. Where he said after praying to Yahweh, he had this dream where he met Jesus. But in the dream, he could tell it was like a fake Jesus. I'm getting like chills talking about this dream right now. And that was the dream, that he was talking to this figure, and the figure was telling him that, the figure was saying that, like, I'm Jesus. He was like saying, like, I'm meeting you. And Frank could tell in the dream that it was like a fake Jesus, and it just like didn't look right and didn't feel right. And that was the whole dream, this like entity trying to like convince him that he was like Christ basically in his dream. And he said after that he never did it again because he was so creeped out. What that means, I have no idea, but it's definitely really weird and really, really creepy. And also he told me that story on Halloween, which made it just extra creepy. So that's a nice little weird lead off there. My opinion, keep a mental icon and statuary room in your dream world as a memory palace where you pray during sleep based. Yeah, I've heard a lot of weird stuff about the memory palace stuff too, honestly. It's kind of weird. A few people, more than one person. So if someone messaged me about this, and I don't want you to feel like I'm talking about you, more than one person has contacted me about something like this, where they start doing the memory palace stuff, and then it gets kind of weird, man. Like you start getting lost in these like worlds, and like there's beings there that'll talk to you, because like when you do the memory palace stuff, you're kind of like creating a whole like little world for yourself. So I've heard a lot of really weird tales about that. So since I want to get as much visual detail in here I don't want to say as much visual detail as possible. I want to make sure I'm utilizing the space in the best way possible and making it as visually interesting as possible. That's what I should say. I'm going to move the lamp a little bit, get a little more light down here. I'm going to put in kind of like a pattern on the top of the baskets. I don't know what to call this pattern, but I use it all the time. But I'm just going to go in and paint in this kind of reminds me of like the top of like a woven basket, in a way. And then I'm going to come through with kind of like a baskety color and put in like the woven notches on the basket. Any other like weird dream exposition I should get out in front before we go back to talking about, or before we go on to talking about like other aspects of dreams? I knew a girl that had prophetic dreams. I told this story on the stream once, but I knew a girl that moved to northern Italy and then started having dreams where people would die and then they would actually die in real life. And she really did not enjoy that. Tell you what, she did not like that. But other than that, not a lot of crazy dream stories for me. Okay, I'm going to throw this in here. I guess I'll probably end up talking about my own dreams too. But I find the dreams in the Bible thing interesting because God can kind of communicate to people however he wants, right? So communicating to someone via a dream is like a very interesting thing to me. I mean, there's people having visions literally left and right in the Bible, and there's people, talking to angels and stuff like that. So that's been one really interesting aspect of going deeper into the Bible for me is, kind of asking myself, like, why? Like I'll read something or think about something, and then when you kind of zoom out and you're like, well, God's in control of everything, there's no reason it has to be a certain way. If God is, the creator of the universe, he could have made it however he wanted. So asking myself why and seeing if I can kind of figure out some like deeper truth or like deeper aspect to it there, you know what I mean? For a lot of the dream symbolism, kind of the answer I came up with was, if you have like an ecstatic vision, like if, you're standing outside your horse stable and, like classic example, you fall off your horse and have this vision of God or something like that, you kind of can't ignore it, you know what I mean? That's like pretty intense. Or, if you're, writing the book of Revelation and you're having all these like crazy out of control visions, you're not going to ignore that. I mean, you're not just going to like walk into the other room and like forget that it happened, So when I was looking at the dreams, and I kind of want to go deeper into this by like unpacking like each one in my own like studies, but I feel like there must be some aspect to it. Like maybe God communicates to people via dreams because in those specific instances, it almost like adds to the element of free will that those people have the choice to ignore it. People have dreams and then wake up and ignore it all the time. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking maybe that's one reason why. It's kind of like God like sending you a message, but being like, hey, if you trust me and want to look deeper into this, you can. But you could also just say, yeah, that was a crazy dream and go on about your day. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, this color here, I really think of this right now for this picture as like basket color. I mean, this yellow ochre literally is just, tell me this isn't the exact color a basket is, right? And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in, this is a chance for me to get some like more texture in the painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of just going to load my brush up and just make these like wide, with like the fat side of the brush. I'm just going to make some like wide strokes, and I'll make it really like illustrative. That's kind of a word that I use when, the materials of the picture are more obviously there. As opposed to like an oil painting. When you look at an oil painting, you could be looking at a photo, right? You don't see the brush strokes usually in an oil painting. So when I use the term illustrative, what I'm thinking of is, manifesting the materials that the picture itself is made from. So I'm just going to go for it. If it looks bad, we can just kind of wash it out, but I think it'll be cool. So I just kind of want to drag these strokes along here. Yeah, perfect. Get kind of like a little bit of a manuscripty vibe. And as I'm loading the brush up, I want to make sure I don't have too much water because I want to get a little bit of this. You call this dry brush when you can see the brush on the paper. It's really a thing in like Asian like ink painting and stuff, but when you look at older like Western manuscripts even, they'll have it just because of the limitations of their materials. Cool. Boom. Boom. And yeah, I'm trying to think where I should go right now in terms of what I should talk about, because I'm thinking about iconostasis, and I guess we should talk about it. But the way he lays out stuff in that book is really awesome, honestly. He describes a lot of the way he describes, like, I guess you could say, like, mystical visions, or really, it's not really mystical visions. It's more like the visionary experience, I guess you could say. The way he describes that is, like, really sophisticated, and kind of made me think of it in a different way. What he basically describes, I'm probably going to, like, butcher it, so like I said, you should read the book and not just, take my word for it. You should read the book. But what I took away from it, I should say, yeah, this is going to look good. So I'm going to, like, load up the brush, and then I'll kind of come back and keep doing this until it kind of, like, builds up a nice, like, kind of like baskety texture. So yeah, what he says is basically, like, so the artist is in this realm of, like, the visible, right? And then when you cross over into the realm of, like, the invisible, then it's almost like you're carrying all this stuff. Like, if your brain, actually, perfect image, if your brain is like a basket, it's kind of like you're carrying all this stuff, but you can't take it over into the realm of the invisible. So it's kind of like the whole basket is, like, spilled, and all the contents kind of just, like, spill out, and it's this kind of, like, I don't want to say meaningless, but it's kind of like this meaningless, like, explosion of, like, symbols and things like that. And so that's like point A, let's say, right? And then you cross over to the realm of the invisible, during your dream or whatever the experience is. And then when you're coming back, kind of the opposite happens. You're, like, loaded up with all this stuff from the, like, invisible realm, and then as you come back into the visible realm, it's like all that stuff you loaded up on in the invisible realm can't be brought over here. So it kind of, like, quickly gets, like, cloaked in this, like, thin membrane of the visible, and all these things kind of, like, cling to it, and you're trying really hard to, like, put it in terms of the visible, but you can't really. And that's, like, point B, let's say. And it's really interesting because what I took away from it, I don't know if he says it explicitly, but what I took away from it is, like, those two things kind of look the same in a weird way, but they're actually totally different. It made me think of, like, surrealist art. Like, sometimes you look at, like, surrealist art, let's say, and it's almost just like a meaningless mishmash of random symbols, right? It's just, like, random shit together. Like, you can look at, like, a Magritte painting. I love Magritte. He's a really great painter. But sometimes when you're looking at some of his paintings, you're like, okay, what am I supposed to, like, take away from this? Like, what's, like, the meaning of this? And I feel like it's that point A. It's like that transitioning from the visible realm into the invisible realm, and the basket's just, like, spilled and scattered, and it's kind of just, like, random stuff happening, right? But sometimes you get the opposite, where you have some, like, mystical vision, and it's all these different symbols, but it's really not just, like, random stuff thrown together. And that's the point B coming back, where instead of, the things scattering because they can't cross over into the shore of, like, the divine realm and the invisible realm, it's the opposite. You're coming back down, and you're forced to kind of use these kind of, like, random symbols and things to convey this, like, experience of coming down from the higher realms. I really have no idea if I'm explaining this well or not, but I hope that made, like, a little bit of sense at least. Basically the idea that there's two different kind of, like, points from which the artistic experience can spring, crossing over from this physical world to the invisible realm, or crossing over from the invisible realm to the physical realm. And although they look similar, they are completely different in terms of the premise and, like, the informational content. It's, like, the most simple way I could say that. And it really kind of blew my mind, man. And I really felt like I could go even, like, through a museum or something, and that I could break up the art in there in terms of those two things. I could look at the art and be like, oh, this is kind of just someone crossing over into the realm of, like, symbolic thought, and almost like Dada art. Like, it doesn't really mean anything, even though it's cloaked in, like, the appearance of meaning. It doesn't really mean anything. And then the opposite, where you're taking something that almost is incomprehensible, like the experience of, like, God or divinity in something, and you're forced to relate it to the viewer in symbols. It could look like just a bunch of random stuff thrown together. Like last week, we were looking at the book of Revelation, and I was saying, it seems like sometimes there's all these, there's bowls and trumpets and all this stuff, but it's the informational content trying to express the invisible realm rather than just being a bunch of random stuff. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't, but it kind of blew my mind, honestly. Maybe I'm explaining it poorly. But, all right, cool. I'm somewhat happy with how this basket came out, but I'm actually just going to put a fat wash of water over it just to kind of smooth it out a little bit. And, yeah, using dreams as a jumping off point for that I thought was really cool. Conversely, of course, the Bible fails to document anyone's, like, meaningless dreams, so we don't really have, like, a ground to, like, contrast it against, but I think that would it's probably to be expected. Cool. Perfect. Alright, so I didn't paint the basket in white, whatever, but I do kind of like this texture that I got here. I'm going to put this in above here too. Perfect. Cool. Okay, no one's talking to me in the chat, so I'll go with me. I'm just going to keep it going. So yeah, there also is a part of the Bible where they explicitly discuss God communicating to people in dreams. It's in Joseph. I'll break that out in a second. As for what I'm painting right now, basket. Obviously, I think about all the symbols that I drop on the stream. Basket's kind of an interesting one because I picked this up from someone in real life. They mentioned this to me, but when Moses is in the basket getting floated away, I'm pretty sure the word they use is the same word that's used for ark. So the basket that Moses is like floated away in kind of becomes like a symbolic, like, I don't want to call it a type because they're both in the Old Testament, but it's almost like a baby ark that he's like carried forth in. So when I was thinking of painting these baskets, I was thinking about that. And just like the symbolism of like the basket in general. I went through a bunch of my symbolism books and I was looking for bread, but bread wasn't in like any of them. I was like, who wrote this? How could you compile a symbolism book? But I got some on deck. Owen Cyclops, would you ever make commissioned art on stream? I mean, if someone asked me to, maybe. The commission stuff, I don't really like to like, flaunt what I'm doing for someone. If someone asked me to, I guess I would. Whatever. But maybe. Kind of figuring out how to run commissions with the studio. I haven't like fully mastered it yet, honestly. Cool. All right, so we got these baskets going on. I have in the book of Jungian symbols, it does break down basket. I don't know if I'm going to break it out right now. The only really interesting kind of like unexpected thing it mentions in there is like the basket as weaving, and then weaving as like a symbolic like activity. So many like ancient myths and stuff have to do with weaving and stuff like that. I'm gonna let this dry and then come back and like mess with it more. But I really do like this color that we got going on here. And actually one thing that was mentioned, this is like a huge stretch, but it's not like being a weird third eye kind of mystical weirdo unless we make huge stretches. But it was saying that the basket is kind of like, this was not in a Christian context, but I took it in a Christian context, obviously, because that's the context that I view everything through. It was saying that the basket is kind of like a womb. It has like a womb-like element to it, and that paradoxically, the basket is made from these like reeds and like parts of corn plants and things like that. And then you take the fruitful part of those plants and make something that like sustains life with it, and then you put it in the basket. So it's like this womb-like thing holding this like life-giving substance, and they're kind of paradoxically made from like the same substance, but it's two completely different aspects of it. So if you have like the corn plant, you take the part of corn you can eat, you take the part of the corn you can't eat, the part you can't eat becomes a basket, and then it holds what you make with the corn you can eat. So in a really weird like maximum level stretch, but also not really a stretch at all, it made me think of Mary and fruit of thy womb, Jesus, prayer, and things like that, because Mary is like, the basket holding the bread. Jesus is like the bread's in a basket, and they're made from the same material. They're both human flesh, right? But in like totally and completely different ways. So when I was thinking of the basket of bread, it was kind of really interesting because when you put on that lens where like everything kind of means something, I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting. But maybe a total stretch, maybe not. Okay, so we got these baskets painted in, and I'm just going to straight up paint some bread in here really quick. Let's hit that book really quick, though. Let's see. What are people saying in the chat? Maybe I misheard. Did you say Dadaism is inherently meaningless, or the opposite of that? I feel like it's kind of revels in its meaninglessness. In case anyone doesn't know what Dada art is, it's kind of, if you don't know anything about art history, it's kind of like, not to sound like a dick, it's kind of like surrealism, but maybe basking more in its meaninglessness. That would be how I would say it. Oh, yo, Lucky Lizard is here. What's up, man? I mentioned you before because you recommended me the book that I started out with. All right, let's see. Tripitaka means 3 baskets and are the Buddhist scriptures. Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, it does mean that. Basket obviously would be like a universal symbol because all cultures have like some kind of basket. Have you ever gotten trapped in a lucid dream? No, actually, the difficulty I have is not waking up from them. Pretty much once I realize that I'm lucid, I wake up like pretty much instantly. Oh, yeah, Timothy Dwyer said Mary is a type of the ark, too. Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. So the basket and the ark are related, and then Mary is like a type of the ark. That's really cool. That's really cool, actually. I've been planning on kind of making a picture where I'm like mapping like a lot of those things together. That's a really awesome connection, though, actually. Thanks for saying that. So yeah, I broke out this book. Jungian symbols, just basket real quick before we move on from it. So let's see. The weaving of the basket, I'm just going to read a few sentences here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The weaving of the basket often incorporates symbolic patterns that are themselves a weaving together of the natural world. So weaving in a lot of like pagan myths and stuff, as you guys may know, often has to do with like creating the universe and stuff like that. Womb-like in form, woven from and holding the vegetation associated with the great goddesses of cyclical life, death, and rebirth, baskets are linked to the mysteries of eternal return. The basket that holds the threshed grain or mown corn carries both the seed for the next season's planting and, symbolically, the ever-dying and reborn deity. So this obviously, like I said, wasn't written in a Christian context, but I don't know, something there I thought was really, really interesting, like the basket, bread, rebirth, Jesus' resurrection. But that was kind of cool. And then just to tie in one last thing with the basket thing, since I want to like squeeze all I can out of the symbols we're using. Maybe other people wouldn't think of this. I didn't think of this, but there is another basket that we use in what I would call folk Christianity, which is the Easter basket. The Easter basket, filled with eggs, carries the promise of springtime rebirth, fertility, and abundance. Kind of cool. Mary, Easter basket, the Ark. You're only going to get those kind of connections here in the show. So yeah, so we're going to move on and paint some bread, and then I want to hit these black birds because I think that would be really sick. Since this is Christian Symbolism painting show, and you guys have hung out for a little bit, or at least you are woke to what's the deal in general. Bread, we're going to paint some bread right now. I mean, bread's like literally probably the most basic Christian symbol, so I don't want to go too much into it because, it's like the thing that everyone probably knows. But I'm going to read just this one paragraph right here anyway, in Signs and Symbol and Christian Art by George Ferguson. Bread has always been a symbol of the means of sustaining life, hence the phrase, bread is the staff of life. In the Old Testament, bread was the symbol of God's providence, care, and nurture of his people. He sent manna to the children of Israel in the wilderness, and when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, "It is manna," for they wist not what it was. And Moses said to them, "This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat." That's in Exodus, obviously. Christ has given new meaning to this symbolism when he said, "I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger." At the Last Supper, Christ used bread as a symbol of his sacrifice upon the cross, and he took bread and gave thanks and brake it, and gave unto them, saying, "This is my body which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me." In case anyone didn't know, that's the deal with bread. There's one other thing I wanted to cover in here before we paint in the bread, which is that I thought this was cool. Got this little book. It's pretty basic. AZ Guide to Bible Signs and Symbols. I pretty much buy any book on symbolism I can possibly find just to, always have different stuff on deck. And what it said in here was pretty basic. I mean, it's a pretty cool book. I'm not knocking it. But the one thing it noted was that as bread goes back to the beginning of humanity, there's one time, actually, it's kind of funny. I got in an argument with someone. This is a really long time ago, like probably 10 years ago. And I kind of started getting woke to the food thing. And, when you start doing that, you think like in very simple terms. So I was like, yeah, bread is bad for you. Like, duh. And I was in an argument with someone and I was like, bread's not like this like really, really ancient food, And someone was like, yeah, it is, dude. So I was like, all right, let's check. And I took out my phone and I searched for bread. And like the first line on the Wikipedia article is like, bread is one of the most ancient foods. I was just an idiot back then. But it says here, so as bread goes back to like the beginning of humanity, it also goes back to the beginning of the Bible. God described the results of the fall. He told Adam, "By the sweat of your brow you will produce food." They use the Hebrew word for bread there, to eat, in Genesis 3:19. I don't speak Hebrew, so I thought it was kind of cool that it uses the word bread there specifically. Anything else we should hit here? No. I think we're good. Perfect. Let's paint in some bread. Get talking about some trippy dream stuff. It's going well. Now I gotta choose a color for the bread. I kind of want like nice bakedness colors on the bread. We got a very brown color palette, so I think the brown with the black is going to be pretty cool. And then maybe we'll get some red coming up. So I think I'm just going to break out the browns. We got raw umber. I'm also thinking maybe burnt umber. Those two colors are kind of like bread colors. And we'll get some white too. You got to pale it out a little bit. And maybe even Naples yellow. Maybe even Naples yellow is kind of like a bread color. Maybe. Like white bread. But this is like potato bread color actually. Cool. So I'm going to quickly kind of paint in the bread, and then because I want to get these black birds in. I think that's going to look really, really, really sick. So yeah, otherwise on dream stuff, I guess I'll kind of go into a little bit while I'm painting this bread, and then I actually really do want to hear from you guys and see what you guys think about all that stuff. I want to know if people have the same kind of like intrinsic, like what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a tinge. People have the same tinge that I have when people start going into their dreams and stuff. Maybe people don't. Maybe it's just me that has this weird like hang up about dreams. But I want to know. But for me, yeah, it's interesting because I have had some like crazy symbolic dreams. And someone asked me before, like, oh, you had this dream of this weird like bloodshot eyes priest and stuff. What does it mean? And I said, well, you know, only you can really unpack your own dreams. But what's interesting for me is that there's like a signal for me that my dreams are not the random like detritus of the day. And that signal is like venomous animals. When I have venomous animals in my dream, that's how I know I'm having like a symbolic dream. I mean, the macro like framing of the dream is always like pretty explicit, but it's like when I see like a snake or like something trying to bite me, usually it's a snake. It's almost always a snake actually. But when I see that and then I wake up and I think about it, that's usually the signal to me that's like, yo, this dream is operating in like a theological context. I don't know how many I've mentioned on the stream before. I don't think I've mentioned that many, but like, sorry if I tell the same story again. But since it's kind of the dream episode, I'm going to mention one or two. I don't think I mentioned this here, but one of the first ones I had when I first moved here, so I moved out to like the middle of nowhere. It's not really the middle of nowhere, but for optics, it kind of is actually. I can hear cows from my front porch. But so I'm going to paint in like a loaf, 2 like loaves of bread at least. And then we'll kind of make like a little pyramid, and then I want to perch these black birds. And I have a few different birds I want to use. I'm not going to spoil the surprise. So anyway, when I first moved out here, I had this dream. I was in this cabin. I was inside this cabin, and it was a really weird cabin. It was almost like a 15-foot, like 20-foot like cube, let's say. So it was like this cube. But it was a normal cabin, you know, with like logs and stuff like that. And I was on this platform that was jutting out of the wall, maybe like 16 feet up in the air. I was on this platform, and me and my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, she was my girlfriend, were sleeping in this bed on this platform. And we were in this bed, and I'm looking down at the ground, and on the ground are 2 of these guys that I knew in New York that I used to do like psychedelics with a lot. And there's all these snakes just pouring into the cabin. It's like the logs, let's say, are just wide enough. You know, in a normal cabin, the logs are touching so air doesn't get in and stuff. But the logs like had just enough space in them so that these snakes were like pouring into the cabin. It was almost like the cabin was in like a bigger cube of snakes, and all these snakes were just pouring in and pouring out, and you could see them like undulating like in and out of the walls, and it was like really, really, really creepy. And they were sleeping in these beds down on the floor. So they're sleeping down on the floor, and I'm up in this bed on this platform. And the whole time in the dream, what I'm thinking is like, oh, I'm safe because I'm up here on this platform. So like I'll be safe, but they're not safe. Like they're way too low to the ground. And if they sleep down there, they're going to die. Like the snakes are going to get them. I didn't really think they were going to die. I was like, the snakes are going to get them. And I was sitting with my wife, and I was like, you know, if we just stay awake because of this elevated position I have, we'll be safe. Like, we'll be able to fend the snakes off because we have this elevated position. But those guys down there sleeping on the floor, those 2 guys, like, they're not going to make it. And it was just that feeling. It was like I said before, like, usually, at least for me, like, the symbolic dreams I have are based around, like, a feeling. And it's just that feeling of, like I said, I'm repeating myself now, but, you know, we're safe up here because of this platform, but they're not safe down there. And when I woke up, I felt like it was almost like a worldview thing. Like, I had become Christian and like cleaned my life up, so I was on this like elevated platform. So even though we were in this like sea of snakes, I had some protection that these other 2 guys didn't have. And it was interesting who the 2 guys were because, like I said, they were guys that I did like psychedelics with 100%. That's like who they are in my mind. So I thought that was really interesting. And when you have symbolic dreams, I mean, I'm sure people here have had symbolic dreams too. But what's interesting for me is like, after I had that dream, I was like, wow, I really would never think of that. Like, that was not just like floating around in my brain. I really felt like it was like an envelope I got, you know, from some other place, let's say. So that was a really, really interesting one. And I've had a few other ones like that with different venomous animals. The craziest one was, I'm not going to talk about my dreams the whole stream, but this is pretty interesting, and at least I think it is, and it's kind of relevant to the whole operation. But I also had this dream. I'll cut a few parts out to make it shorter, but I had this dream. I was at this church, and we were standing outside this church. It was like a really beautiful, I didn't really know at the time, but I guess it was like an Orthodox church, honestly. Oh, I like how that bread looks. That looks good. This is kind of like a burnt loaf, but this bread looks pretty good over here. And kind of want it to dry faster. And yeah, so I'm outside this church, and we're standing with these people, and I was just thinking like, wow, it's so nice to be standing with these like wholesome people outside, and they were married, and they were my age, and I was like, wow, I finally found some like people my age that like I can talk to. Like, this is really awesome, which I don't have in real life. Spoiler alert. And we were talking to them and joking around or something, and they were like, yeah, like you guys should get married soon. We weren't married at the time, although me and my wife are married now. And we're joking around, and then one of the guys was like, oh, did you meet like Father, I don't know what his name was, but like Father Brian yet, like the priest inside or some monk inside? And I was like, no, I haven't met him yet. And the guy gets really serious. So we're like joking around, right? And sorry if you heard this story before, but I think it's really good. And we were joking around, and he gets really serious, and he looks at me right in the eyes, and he's like, when you talk to him, he was like, you can never lie to him. And there's just like dead silence. So I was like, yeah. I was like, why would I lie to the priest? Like, yeah, for sure, man. I was like, definitely not, you know? And then later we're inside, and we're getting like food or something. It's kind of like cafeteria lineup, like getting food. And the priests are there, and one of the priests is this guy I was talking about. And as I'm getting my food, walking along, I talked to the priest, and I was like, hey man, like you have a really great like situation here, a really great setup, you know? In my mind it was like just a church. It wasn't any part of like a particular denomination. And I was like, how would I like join the church? Like how would I go about joining this church? And he's like, oh, well, you know, we were actually just talking about you, and there's a job that you would be perfect for. This is like one of the most defining dreams of my life. He's like, we have this job you'd be perfect for. And I was like, oh, what is it? And he's like, well, in the school, there's a part of the church that's the school for the children. There are these tanks where we keep these venomous animals, like tarantulas and venomous, poisonous animals and stuff like that. And we need someone to handle the poisonous animals and move them into different tanks so we can show them to the kids and they can learn about these like poisonous animals. And we thought you would be the perfect person to do it. But the thing is, it's really, really, really dangerous, and you could die. If you mishandle the animals, if you slip up or drop one or something, like you could definitely die. It's really, really, really dangerous. And he was like, do you think that would be a good job for you? And I was like, wow, what? I was like, I really don't. I was like, there's no other jobs or anything like that? And he's like, no. He was like, no, we were talking about you, and you in particular would be perfect for this job. So I was like, okay. And I didn't really know what to say. So in the moment, I just said, well, I'm kind of clumsy, you know? I wouldn't really want to drop one of the animals and, you know, get hurt. Like I was like, let me think about it, you know? And it was funny because later I was just standing around in my dream, and I realized that I did kind of lie to him. Because, I mean, I'm clumsy, like whatever, but I'm not any more clumsy than any random person. I'm not like a really clumsy person or something. And I thought about what the guy said outside the church, and I was like, oh, I did lie to him. I was like, wow, I did. And I thought that was really interesting. And of course, obviously, if you like follow me on Twitter, you know that it kind of like oddly, I've ended up in the position where I have all these kind of like, I guess you could say like scars from modernity, like, you know, no more so than anyone else, but whatever, you know, I used to do a lot of stuff. And I really like talking about it and like having people not go down that road, you know, with like the occult or drugs or whatever. So I thought that dream was so interesting because in this dream, the priest was like, yeah, we need you to handle these poisonous animals. So look how good this bread is while I'm talking, by the way. This is going really well. The priest was like, yeah, we want you to handle these poisonous animals so the children can learn about them, but you could die because it's really dangerous. And I thought that was so interesting, man. It was so weird. And like I said, like, I'm just going to let this dry a little bit because I really like how it's coming out. I really felt like it was symbolic. I really felt like it meant something that I had that dream. And just to wrap it up, since I guess for the dream episode I should fully explicate one of my dreams, at the end of the dream, it was kind of like this 3-part structured dream. Check this out. This is also really symbolic. And then I'll stop talking about my own dreams, maybe. But I was with the same group of people. So not the same group, like the whole group of people. It was like from the same church. We were in the woods outside the church, and the whole congregation was there. It was like everyone from the church was there. That's how I knew who I knew it was in my mind. And we were running through the woods. So we're running like full speed through the woods. But I'm getting like chills talking about this right now. It was like a joyful running. and I was just running with this huge group of people on this path through the woods, and everyone's running like really hard, but it's like out of like fun. It's like joyous to like run this race. It's not a race, but we're running through the woods. And it felt so good, and I was thinking like, wow, it feels so good to like run with all these people like from the church. Like, wow, this is so awesome. And as we were running, I noticed that we were on this kind of like path. It was maybe like one of those paths that's like made of stone, but it's not like paved. It just happens to be made of stone. So we're running on this path of stone, and I look up on the side of the stone, and there's dirt. It's like muddy. We're running through a rainy forest. And I was like, oh, it would be cool for me to like run off the path. So I got off the path, and I'm running through the mud, and I'm looking in the mud behind me, and I'm leaving these footprints. I'm like the only one off the path, and then someone that's part of the crowd is like, it's like, hey man, and like in a very like friendly, like loving way. It's like, hey man, like don't do that, like don't run off the path, and kind of what he was communicating to me was like, the nature in the forest is so beautiful. Like if you run off the path and leave these footprints, it kind of like ruins it a little bit, And he's like, hey man, stay on the path with us, And I was like, oh yeah, you're totally right. I was like, why am I off the path right now? Like, what am I doing? And I got back on the path, and I was just running with everyone. And we went up these stairs, and the stairs were like really beautiful, and the church was there. That was the whole dream basically, but it was just really crazy. I woke up and I was like, wow, what? And I felt like I had like almost like a lifetime's worth of like information to like unpack from that like one dream. But it was really crazy. Like, I met those young people, and I just told you the whole story. I'm not going to repeat it. But yeah, that was definitely the most symbolic dream I've ever had in my life, honestly. And that kind of really turned me around to like, oh, maybe all these dreams I'm having aren't just like random like detritus from my subconscious. I was like, wow, I really thought that was trying to tell me something. And I really felt like it was, man. I really felt like it was. I don't know if it was interesting to hear me like recount that whole dream, but hopefully it was. And like I said, that was definitely the most symbolic dream I've ever had. I mean, come on. I'm like running with a church group through the forest, and they're telling me to like stay on the path. And I met those kids, and they told me not to lie to the priest, and the priest told me it's like my job to like handle these like poisonous animals to like help children. Like, what the heck? I think about that sometimes a lot, actually. Anyway, it's always at least one like hardcore monologue each show, and that was definitely it. Anyway, man, these breads, these breads are looking really good. They actually really are. I was wondering if you'd be able to tell they were breads, but you definitely can. Nice. Cool. Well, I think we painted in the bread pretty well, guys. I think we did a really good job. Man, these breads look awesome. I'm going to put in one more little red one up here. One more little Venetian red bread. Isidore said, Owen Cyclops, you should write a biography, sort of bring all your threads together and do it more long form. Put the details you couldn't before in illustrations. Yeah, I have a few... I thought dreams would be kind of a natural segue to like narrative, which is really what I've been like obsessing about the past few weeks and thinking about narrative in like a theological context, which kind of goes with dreams because dreams are kind of narrative. But yeah, I have an idea for a graphic novel that I am going to do. I don't know if I mentioned it on the stream before. I think I mentioned it once quickly, but basically if you saw my sex comic, I want to do that about a bunch of different topics and then weave them all together. And then the last one would be like religion, and it'd be about like how I like became Christian after all that stuff. But I actually know I'm going to do it because I feel like very, very, very called to do it. So there's sex. I'm also going to do weed, psychedelics, the occult, and then probably Christianity after that. It's just honestly so like, it sounds kind of lame, but I mean, we're on an art stream and talking about being creative. That's the whole reason I made the stream. It's just so like emotionally taxing to unpack all that stuff. It's really funny. Like I can come in the studio, and if I'm just making like art, like painting like Thomas Aquinas or like, some saint or like lily flowers and nice beautiful stuff, like it's a great day if I'm in here all day doing all that. But when I'm working on those comics and I come in and the whole day I'm like unpacking this like very heavy and like painful like psychological material, it's like extremely burdensome and like really affects like the rest of my life, honestly. Like it's actually, truly, I post about hypersigils sometimes on Twitter. A hypersigil, I guess I will explain that. Basically a sigil is kind of like, it's used in like magic terminology and like occult stuff, but I feel like it has an application beyond that. It's basically just a symbol that's meant to kind of like evoke something, or actually it's really not even that like black magic-y. A sigil is basically an emblem you make that's supposed to kind of like get something done, that's kind of like supposed to do something magically. It's just like a little drawing. You've probably seen them if you've seen any weird like grimoires and like occult stuff, like weird little black lines and like a black circle. They have a very like black magic look to them for a good reason, because that's kind of what they are. But there's something called a hypersigil that this guy Grant Morrison, he was an author, coined that term, which is like a sigil extended through time, and it's like a narrative that is meant to kind of have a function of like doing something beyond itself. So he wrote a comic book called The Invisibles that was like a hypersigil to him, and by writing it, he like tried to change parts of his life. Like there were characters that represented like parts of his life, and he said it was really crazy because it actually like started happening, like things he was writing in the book and stuff. Whether or not that's true, I feel like it's literally like when I do stuff like that, it's like exercising like demons, like literally. Like when I was doing that sex comic, every Sunday when I came in to do it, it was literally like cracking open this like black box of like sludge inside of me and like cleaning it out. Like that's really what it felt like. Have you ever worked with like a really dirty machine and you finally crack it open and there's like years of like gunk and like dirt in there, and you have like a razor blade or like a scraper and you're just like chiseling out all this like black stuff? Honestly, that's really what it felt like, which feels really good, but it's very emotionally taxing. So that's why I haven't started on the next chapter yet. Honestly, I was like, damn, I feel like I need some time off. But I am going to do that. That was a big, kind of a long walk for your question. But yeah, I am going to do some kind of like biographical thing for sure. Japanese Letterman says, you said wabi-sabi on Twitter the other day, so I went and looked up the kanji since I had never heard it before. The individual ones have multiple meanings, but I think they're neat. Wabi meaning pride, solitude, and sabi meaning loneliness. Pretty cool, actually. Yeah, wabi-sabi is one of my favorite art concepts. In case you've never heard of that, it's like beauty and imperfection. It's really a thing in like Japanese art. We could do a whole stream on that. Actually, maybe we will one day. With like, I can do like sumi painting and stuff. We can talk about that. But it's basically finding beauty and imperfection. A lot of like Japanese pottery or Japanese architecture will rely on that, kind of letting a natural process happen, and then the accidents are kind of what's beautiful. Actually, even in terms of watercolor, just like letting kind of things happen, like the way I kind of let this gradient happen and, leave a little bit of chaos in it, and that's like what's beautiful. That's really what wabi-sabi is. Okay, so we have this cute picture here of a guy with a basket of bread on his head, and honestly, I was kind of talking the whole time, but I'm really stoked about how this bread looks. Look at this. Tell me this isn't a delicious looking loaf of bread. It's got to be, right? Okay, but what I want to do right now is I want to put in some black birds. And I kind of anticipated that we would get this kind of nice look with the guy's head and the basket, but I want the birds to have this like dark flavor. And just to bring it back to like the biblical typology and symbolism and stuff, one other thing I was thinking as I was kind of unpacking all this, I mentioned it before, like the baskets, kind of like Mary, even if you're not into that, doesn't really matter, but holding the bread, and bread is explicitly symbolic of Jesus and stuff. And I was thinking of the birds. The birds come to eat the bread. So it's interesting because one Bible verse I think about all the time is, I'm pretty sure it's in Matthew. It is in Matthew, where he says, Jesus says this, look at the birds of the air. They don't gather into barns. They don't plant wheat, but they eat and they have nests and they just let, God take care of them basically. And that's how you should be also. It's exactly how it's written. So it's kind of interesting, the bread is like obviously symbolic of Christ, and then the birds come and eat the bread, and I don't know, birds symbolic of like followers of Christ in some way. So the birds are coming to eat this bread. So I wanted to paint them in as like these black birds because ultimately for this guy, this is like a dark omen because it's symbolic of his own death. This guy ends up dying. This vision is foreshadowing that. And the birds are black because it's like, his death, and it's kind of like a dark scene. But also in a way, like we're kind of like the birds, and we are stained dark with like sin and, our corporeal, our deeper fallen is the word I was looking for, our fallen nature. But we can be redeemed, but we're kind of like these dark birds also. So that was kind of me putting in too much thought into why we're painting in these black birds right now. And I got 3 birds in particular I want to use. We're doing really well on time. It's going to be the first show that goes well on the time front. So first up, I wanted to use... So what we're going to do is we're going to have two smaller birds, like up here, that are going to be kind of in flight, but they have their beaks pointed down. So 1, 2, it'll be like a mirror image. A kind of like vulture-y bird here. I know it's too small for a vulture, but I kind of want to bring a little bit of the vulture vibe over here. Perched over here. Actually, we'll have to perch him like up here to make sure there's enough room. And then over here, I want to use a woodpecker. In the Renaissance Symbolism book, it says woodpecker is symbolic of evil. I've never seen that in my life, but I think woodpecker is kind of a cool bird. So we'll start up here at the top. And to go with the woodpecker, in case you haven't seen a woodpecker recently, they have this like red kind of like cape on their head. So I picked this black bird. Can I just show my phone on the stream? I guess I can, right? What's going to happen? Is there any doxing information here? No, it's fine. So I got this bird right here. This is a red-winged blackbird. I think that's what it's called. And that's what we're going to use right now. So you can see it. But I'm going to paint him flying, so this picture isn't going to be of that much of a use to me. But he has this kind of red mark on his side. And I thought that was kind of cool, too, thinking too deeply, like I said, about the colors and stuff. Because, we're like that black bird. But if we have that patch of red on us, if we have that patch of kind of, participating in Christ's passion, red is like symbolic of the passion and in Christian art usually, then we're kind of like redeemed in a way. And yes, I do think that hard about everything I do. I just don't normally explicate it fully. So let's do it. So I'm just going to paint it in. I got to start on this side because when you're painting, you kind of have to move from left to right. So but otherwise, if I painted in this one first and then put my hand down to paint this one, it would smudge it. So we'll paint in this one on the left over here. And yeah, like I said initially, way back in the beginning, kind of the big theme of the stream is getting people to do art and get thinking creatively. So it's kind of a really good example of like the absurd level of thought that I kind of put into everything. I don't mean absurd level of thought like, I'm a genius. No one can possibly unpack my layered symbolism. All I mean is like I don't do anything arbitrarily, even if it's just like a tiny little detail in the background. I really do think about like every little thing I'm doing, and I think about how it relates like symbolically to the whole. And even if like, like I just said, would anyone ever look at a picture like this and be like, oh, obviously that red mark on the bird's wing represents how, even though these birds are dark with fallen original sin, they can be redeemed by participating in Christ's passion. Like, no, obviously no one would ever think that, duh. But I think those little details, even if people don't think of them, kind of do add up to make like a deeper whole. And then also, part of why we do art is like, I don't want to say it's for ourselves, but it does transform your own consciousness in some way. And as you start to think of things deeper and deeper, and nothing really is done arbitrarily, it enhances your own craft and your own life in a way because you impart that intentionality to everything you do then. There's a book I mentioned on the stream one time. Damn, I forgot the title because I didn't think about talking about it. I mentioned this anecdote once before, but it's worth hearing because it's one of my favorite anecdotes about being creative. But it was something about how to direct, or like it was about directing a play, and I read it because I was like, this is really different than what I do. What could this book about directing plays be about? And what it said in there, the one thing I took away from it was some story where a director was working on a play, and one of the actors said, there's a scene where like the actor moved a chair. And the actor asked the director, like, hey, where do you want me to put this chair? You want me to put it, over here to the left? Or you want me to put it straight on? And the director said, like, it doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. And the person writing the book said that was the worst possible response because in that moment when you, like, relinquish control over something, it's like then the whole thing just, like, falls apart. You have to, like, exert yourself over, like, every little detail of the stage. Otherwise, it's like nothing really matters. And whether or not that's true, I kind of feel that way about painting in a way. Even if you let something be like a wabi-sabi like accident, you kind of do it intentionally. If you just kind of have an attitude of like, well, it doesn't matter, then the whole thing kind of like falls apart. All right. Cool. Nice. Doesn't really look like the bird that I painted in, but I wanted to give it a long beak so it was like eating the bread. Doesn't really matter. Cool. Maybe we'll even put like a small bird. Yeah, we will. We'll put a small bird like kingfisher style, like perched up here. All right, cool. And we're not near done yet, but, we're pretty deep in, so I'll start taking questions from the chat, and maybe I'll talk more about dreams or whatever, but let's see. The altar for the sacrifice of the Israelites was meant to be on uncut stones. Norse churches have uncut rune stones in their foundation, cornerstone verse. Yeah, that's always been one of my favorite verses in the Bible, too. I think it's Moses? I don't know who says it, actually, but it says, use unhewn. Unhewn was in the Bible I had at my house. Unhewn stones, because by hewing them, you've made them profane. Almost like the stones are perfect, and by trying to mark up the stones, you profane them. I thought that was really awesome. Yeah, that is very like wabi-sabi in a way. It's like wabi-sabi like plus theology. Nice. We got this like symbolic birds up in the sky. Made their beaks really long. I actually kind of like it though. Lucky Lizard said, how similar is Dream World to the aerial realm, astral plane, or completely different? Florensky seems to be sort of identifying them with each other in terms of the upward motion. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I see what you said. Like, I did psychedelics, like the astral realm and stuff. It's interesting because, like, that term astral realm, it's almost like one of those things that could mean anything based on who you're talking to. Like if you're talking to someone that's deep in like, you know, new agey like psychedelics world, like they'll talk about like smoking DMT and like going to the astral realm. But if you read like older mystical stuff, it's almost like the astral realm is just like the realm of dreams, just like the realm of dreams. If you read like some more kind of like bordering on sciencey, secular-y, Western occult stuff, you know, they'll talk about the astral realm as just kind of like they'll kind of use that term meaning almost like the Platonic realm of forms, almost like the realm of just like ideas. You know, they'll be like, oh, it's like the astral realm, you know, ideas, things like that. So people use that term very, very, very differently. I don't really think it means like that much, honestly. But I don't know. I don't really... Oh, I got a little glare over here. Let me move the light. I'll let the paint dry and then I'll move it back. There we go. Perfect. I don't really think of the dream realm as intersecting as much with like, I guess what you can call like shamanica and like weird magic-y stuff as other people do, honestly. Just because I feel like it does have one foot in the subconscious and one foot in like the physical mind, even if stuff is coming in from outside. Maybe that outside is, theological messengers, I guess you could say, or, you know, divine things or things like that. I still feel like it always has one foot in the mind. I mean, even when I like go, I guess I could say it this way. Even when I go somewhere in my dreams, I don't usually feel like I actually, like my spirit actually traveled somewhere. I mean, do you guys feel that way? I kind of don't. I'm always kind of aware that it's like something that's happening in my mind. Even if, you know, I'm not such a holy person that this would happen, but even if like an angel appeared to me in my dream or something, even if I thought that was 100% real, I would still kind of feel like it happened in my mind. You know, does that make sense? So I don't really equate it with some kind of like outside realm or anything like that. Okay, I want to put some kind of like vulture-y birds in here, but it's too small to be straight up vultures. I'm kind of wondering if I can get away with just giving them red heads anyway. Kind of like a vulture, kind of like small little turkey vultures. I think I'm just going to do it. If it looks kind of weird, you know, whatever. It's my picture. I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to use a color I don't normally use. I'm just going to use the straight cadmium red. Normally I would use the cadmium scarlet. As I'm talking about this, though, I kind of feel like I should use the cadmium scarlet, so I'm actually going to undo what I just said and deploy the cadmium scarlet. I'm saying that because I want to get as much contrast as possible. If I use kind of like a dark red next to the black, it's not going to be as high contrast as it should be, so I'm just going to drop a fat dab of cadmium scarlet right there. Is it true that Jung said that the fourth member of the Trinity was Satan? Interesting. I never heard that, but definitely possible. I have a very, like, I don't want to say love-hate relationship, but I have a very, you know, interesting relationship with the Jungian stuff, I guess you could say. I feel like Jung is like a kind of a guy that could go either way for me, depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes I feel like he was just kind of, you know, I mean, either way, he was obviously like a very like brilliant, intelligent person. I'm gonna move this water because I keep blocking the light when I move my hand over here. I mean, no matter what you think about him, he was like a very brilliant, intelligent person. But sometimes I feel like there's like a dark force element there. To be honest with you, it's almost like, I hate saying this, but it's almost like proto New Age in a way. Not that he made it that, but other people used it for that afterwards. Sometimes I feel like then though, other times I feel like there's not really a dark element there, so I can't really say. I'd have to like go pretty hard. I mean, he was like talking to some angel. I don't know if it was an angel, but do you guys know about that? If you don't know about it, check it out. He talked to this being. It was like a being that he spoke with often, and he got a lot of his ideas from it. I forget what the being was called. It was called like Flavian or something. It was called Philemon. 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 He spoke with this like kind of, it was actually a kingfisher winged angel, which kind of creeped me out because I really love the kingfisher symbolism and I use it a lot. He spoke with this like kingfisher winged angel called Philemon often, and it apparently gave him like a lot of ideas. So it's kind of weird. Like, was it a demon? Was it an angel? I haven't like fully unpacked that one yet. Not that you asked me, but yeah. Oh, Peter M. said, I think I found the source of why Saint Odilo is the patron saint of people with jaundice. Hit me with it. Hit me with it. You're already a mod in the chat, but, I mean, maybe I can make you like a super mod if you tell me, because I am very curious. I couldn't figure it out, honestly. Okay, so I'm going to paint this kind of vulture-y creature in, but I'm not going to make it like a full-on vulture, but I'm going to add a little bit of the vulture neck too. This is like turkey vulture. Whenever I say vulture, I always mean turkey vulture. And I'm going to use burnt umber right here. Cool. So I'm going to throw this in here. I'm going to give him this kind of like brown, kind of like turkey vulture neck, and then give him like the fat vulture body. That's really what makes a vulture look like a vulture, honestly. I actually have a drawing right behind me that has these two vultures in it that I should show you guys. I think I drew it like last fall, but I haven't done anything with it yet. Okay, I'm going to give him the fat vulture-y neck. Boom, there we go. With the brown. Yo, I got a super chat. Wow, it's very flattering. Thank you. I very humbly accept your super chat. That's great. Thank you, Bia0000. Just 3 zeros. Gotta respect the name. 3 zeros. Seems like most books I look up about dreaming are occult/occult adjacent. Do you think dreams are one of those things that should be taken back, like how you describe symbols with evil connotations? That's interesting. Yeah, well, you know, I think that probably part of that probably has to do with the fact that, like, I don't really think there would be like a Christian precedence for like lucid dreaming. And then I think that most of the books that are kind of like about dreaming that catch on are about lucid dreaming, right? Because you have dreams, like you don't need to read a book about them, right? And then also probably part of that is that interpreting the dream symbolism usually, how should I say this, exits a biblical context, because, you know, someone has a dream about an airplane. It would take a pretty like sophisticated person to parse that out and put it into like biblical symbolism. It's a lot easier to like, you know, just kind of go with like a modern, like we were just saying, like Jungian interpretation. And then Jungian is kind of like occult adjacent, in my opinion, just by virtue of not being like explicitly Christian. I guess I could unpack that, but that's kind of just how I feel. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting also because it's a very like subtle topic. Like you kind of have to be able to distinguish your meaningful dreams from your not meaningful dreams. So in one way, yeah, for sure. But I kind of feel like it's like something that would come, what should I say, like secondarily, like as a secondary thing. Wow, I really like this like dry brush texture here. I might actually just leave that in. It looks really sick, and just like throw up a little dark color there. I'm trying to put it over here. I guess my answer to that is kind of like, I feel like yes, but that it's something that would come like secondarily, something that would come like as a second order effect from having like a God-centered worldview and all that stuff. I feel like lusting, it also, I feel like maybe the dream thing touches the occult because it has the air of like lusting for divinity and lusting for visions, and you know, you're like, oh, I'm like this kind of person, so I should be having like this kind of vision, and like, oh, maybe I'm such like a holy deep person, like I'm gonna have this kind of scene and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe that's why. Maybe it's something that kind of comes like secondarily, like I said, after like squaring everything away. It's probably like reclaiming dreams would probably be like a consequence of like propagating like a God-centered worldview, but I don't know. I don't really know if it would be like a plot that we could do too much work on, because yeah, it's almost like over-focusing on dreams kind of lends itself to magical, hands-on, kind of like neo-shamanica kind of stuff. So yeah, I couldn't really say. But that's also part of why I wanted to move over and do some dreams along with the vision stuff in the Bible, because yeah, I mean, prophetic dreams are part of the Bible, and I think that when I was planning the show out, the paint's too wet for me to put the eye down. I'm just going to leave it. That looks pretty tight though, honestly. Yeah, I kind of had that feeling when I was planning this show out, honestly, as I was like, oh yeah, like, it kind of hit me like, oh yeah, like dreams are part of like the visions in the Bible, like, of course. And I kind of had the feeling you describe of like, oh yeah, like we get dreams. Dreams are part of our thing too. So yes and no. Whenever anyone asks me something complicated, the answer is yes and also no. But good question, and thanks for your super chat. That's dope, by the way. Okay. I'm going to put a woodpecker in. I'm going to put the woodpecker in as the last bird, and they kind of have a little bit of a weird structure, so I'm going to see if I can nail it. Let's see how it goes. I'm just going to kind of go for it. They actually have like a really long black beak. But to elaborate on that, yeah, I feel like if we did, it would be like a recentering of... There we go. Perfect. the like symbolic dreams of the Bible, and like I guess really it makes me think of like the larger situation of like almost like reclaiming like symbolic interpretation itself, you know? Like I feel like Christianity in the Renaissance symbolism book I have, it says something really intelligent in there. Probably many things, but one thing in particular. It says that part of the reason why the Renaissance aesthetic is eternal is that it's a complete symbolic and visual crystallization of Western man's spiritual experience. And I think that is just so on point. So I'm going to say it again, actually. That it's a complete crystallization that totally embodies Western peoples. I mean, in the book it's Western because it's the Renaissance. You could say humanity in general. It's not specific to Western people, just to be clear. I don't even know if it says Western. Maybe it just says Christian. That embodies Christian man's spiritual experience. And I feel like in a way, like people don't really think of Christianity and the Bible. Oh, I had it until this back line. People don't really think of like Christianity and the Bible as, you know, having something to say or to really participate in the type of like symbolic and visual thinking that people are so lusting after today. So yeah, I feel like it would be like a consequence of like reclaiming that. Like that's what I have my eyes set on, honestly. Like that's like the enemy headquarters in a way, honestly. Is sorry, you keep seeing my hand go off screen. I have this picture of a woodpecker, and I just want to make sure I'm kind of like getting it right, but I'm going to stop looking at it right now. That's like the enemy headquarters that I have my sights focused on, because like I've been around a lot of people that are getting in and out of occult stuff and things like that, and like, I mean, you guys probably know, but like if you see someone's face when they're like, oh, you know about tarot cards? You know, oh, you can tell me about like astrology stuff? Like you can literally see like you can see their spirit like kick back on, and like you can see this light in their eyes, and they're like, oh, like I really want like something of that world of like thinking deeper about things and stuff, and oh my god, you know something about that? And dude, like yeah, you can see like a light like kick on in their faces. And people don't think of the Bible or Christianity as having something to do with that world. I mean, they're so desperate for it. This is like kind of cliche for the stream, but you know what I mean? You can show them a tarot card and be like, yeah, some person drew this like 100 years ago, and it's like a tower, and it means this, and they're like, wow, like, oh my god, it's so deep and amazing, like, thank you. But then if you're like, yeah, and in the Bible, which is way older, they're like, oh, okay, never mind. So yeah, I feel like reclaiming that is really like the, wow, it's a pretty good woodpecker out. I'm going to throw some red on the back of this woodpecker. But yeah, I feel like reclaiming that is really the key for reclaiming all that stuff. It's like the symbolic consciousness. I got to come up with a better term for that. I wanted to give you a really long answer, not just because you gave me a super chat, but because that was a good question. But let's see what else people are saying. Got to differentiate prophetic dreams from natural ones. Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, Peter M. with the S02E09. In the work he mentions, oh yeah, as far as I can tell, it's first referenced in La Vie des Saints et Sanctes d'Avignon, French book, 1600s. In the work, he mentions it as an already existing practice of going to Cluny and seeking healing by touching Saint Odilo vestments, and that he personally was cured of jaundice. So interestingly, it doesn't come from the life of him, but rather that these were the miracles happening after his death. Yeah, I suspected that. He's French. I don't know why I associate being French with jaundice, actually, but I kind of do. So I figured maybe that was it, but that's dope. I'm gonna Google actually exactly what you said there and pull up whatever you found. So that's sick. That's really dope. Thanks, man. Yeah, I have a little picture of him, and I'm actually printing out a little picture of him to have in my room. Not relevant to the dream thing, but I had this medical thing where I get jaundice sometimes. Kind of sucks, but I don't really get it anymore. Actually, I haven't had it for a really long time. So maybe the stickers. Saint Odilo was like, damn, those stickers look good. All right. I'm going to pull some strings. No, I'm just kidding. It's not how it works, but maybe. Anyway, cool, man. I'm definitely going to check that out. Thanks for finding that. That's really dope. What else are people saying? Thoughts about weird Jordan Peterson dreams where he saw himself floating above everything. I haven't heard of Jordan Peterson dream stuff, but I will say that I heard, maybe you guys heard too, the thing about Jordan Peterson potentially having Wendigo sickness, and I literally couldn't stop thinking about it for like 2 weeks. I wanted to make a post on Twitter about it, but I was like, he just got out of the hospital. I'm not going to blow up his spot. But on the stream, I definitely will. In case you guys don't know, this is a really cool, really weird rabbit hole to fall into. But basically, Jordan Peterson has like a kind of like kinship and has worked with this Native American tribe that has some like Wendigo stuff in their mythology, and basically they have this like illness where like you crave human flesh, and someone was saying that that's part of the reason why he like gravitated really hard towards the all meat diet, which sounds really stupid, but when you look into it, it's pretty crazy actually. It's pretty crazy. The only reason I took that even a little seriously is he has an interview on Joe Rogan where he mentions that after being on the all meat diet, he had apple cider one time and it messed up his system for like a month, and that he like couldn't do anything for like a full month. And I was like, that's insane. I was like, something must be going on here if this guy just has like apple cider and is incapacitated for like a full month. I mean, come on, does that sound plausible to anyone? I'm not saying he's lying, but I mean, that's insane. So anyway, cool little detour. Like to give people something to look into if they want to creep themselves out. Dreams are still part of the spiritual battleground. There's several orthodox evening prayers to protect yourself from demonic dreams and sleep. Yeah, I've had a few kind of demonic dreams too. Not really going to go into it, but I have had some like that. I had a dream recently where some like woman was trying to get me to like cheat on my wife. And it was really confusing because I was like, what? I was like, I would never do that. And like I was in this like room with her. And it's oddly like wholesome because I was like, what's going on? I was like, why am I here? I was like so alarmed. I was like, why am I in this room with this like woman? I told my wife, she was like, that's cute. So she knows, never going to go down. Have you read Valent Tomberg's Meditations on the Tarot? Oh yeah, I didn't read all of it to be honest with you, but I did pick it up. People ask me about that a lot because it's an overlap of like Christianity and esoterica. I thought the intro was really, really, really great. I do recommend people read the intro just to get an idea of like, even if they disagree with it, how certain people see Christianity dovetailing with like esoterica and kind of like the esoteric worldview. The book's called Meditations on the Tarot. It's actually one of the best like explanations of that. But other than that, I thought the book was kind of one of those books where it just kind of like goes on and on and on and on and on, to be honest with you. And I think I've said this on the stream before, but it's like, you know, you open up the chapter on the chariot, and it's like the chariot is a vehicle traveling, going from one place to another, and then it kind of kicks off and it's talking about all this stuff that has like nothing to do with the chariot, and then for like 15 pages, and then on the last page of the chapter it's like, so that's the chariot, and you're like, wait, what are we talking about? Maybe I just read it like too early in the morning and didn't really put enough time into it, but it's one of those books where like, for me personally, I was like, I can't tell if this is way too deep for me or if like, am I not getting this? So there was some cool stuff in it, but he's also kind of weird. Like he talks about reincarnation in there, which is kind of like a red flag for me when I'm doing people that are esoteric and into Christianity. I mean, I'll tolerate a lot of stuff when I'm reading. It's not like I see the word reincarnation and like throw the book out the window, but the way he talks about it in there is kind of like, well, everyone knows reincarnation is real, so... And I'm like, what? Back up. Okay, cool. I'm going to put in this kind of like wing back here behind the bird. Just kind of like subtly back there. I really like how this is coming out, actually. Okay, I'm going to put one more little black bird up here, kind of pointing up with his beak. Yeah, it looks pretty dope. It's been I've been talking a lot. I haven't been talking too much about the painting, but yeah, it looks pretty dope. I'm going to get this guy in here. I'm going to make this almost like a little kingfisher bird silhouette. I'm just going to put in the bird, and then I'm going to give him kind of like a fat bird body down here. Yeah, perfect. That is exactly the look that I wanted for this bird. Literally exactly. He says the same thing over and over and over again, but it helped me start to bridge the gap. Now I don't really believe in Christian Hermeticism. Yeah, I mean, one of my choice quotes, quoting myself, I'm like enlightened by my own intelligence over here, but Hermeticism is largely a meme. I'm sure people will get mad at me for saying that, but it's mostly a meme. Even to the extent that it's real, it's a meme. Okay, this looks dope. This looks really dope. Nice. I'm stoked about this. Okay, how are we on time? Oh, we're doing perfect on time. This is perfect. Okay, so I'm going to paint in maybe a little bit of like darker red smoke, kind of like it's a smoky dream space. Actually, first I'm going to paint in, okay, so I have to think about how I'm going to close this out, basically. I kind of want to put in some like light. That's what I've been doing recently. I've kind of been putting in like light, like if it's a dream, we're in this like luminous space. I think that's probably a good move. I mean, I'm tempted to do something like darker because it's this dream. It's kind of like a dark dream. I got a lot of options here. Let's kind of focus in on picture mode for a second. So I'm going to take the fat brush, obviously, one of the bigger brushes. I could even do a wash of like the vermilion. I think maybe that's what I should do. Just get the vermilion like super loose and kind of just wash it in. And then I'll go, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go back in with the Venetian red and paint in a little bit of almost like smoky fog. And then that's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to kind of close it out. I think this is going to be chill. So we're getting and landing the played mode. If anyone wants to ask me anything else, feel free to ask me. You know, it's funny, when I was starting the show, I was like, oh, I wonder if we have enough to talk about, but I've just been literally talking the whole time, and I didn't even get to like a lot of the stuff I was thinking of, so that's good, though. It's good to like have it interesting. Speaking of Jordan Peterson, one thing that he said that I thought was really true is that, like, if someone's listening to you talk, you know, I've done a lot of like public speaking, like I mentioned before, it's more interesting for them. Actually, this ties in with the wabi-sabi stuff, too. It's more interesting for them if you're kind of like thinking a little bit on the fly. Like if I was reading off a script, it's like not really that exciting. But when they can kind of feel that you're also like working through something with them, I think it's a little bit more exciting. Maybe you guys don't feel that way, but I do. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of paint in this, like, this is perfect. So I was hoping that when I dropped the kind of vermilion in here, that it would lose its intensity and just become kind of this like foggy color. So I just want to make sure. What I should have done is wet the paper first. That was a very rookie mistake, but it's okay. It's all good. So I'm going to wet the paper first up here. I'm going to come in with a little bit of the red, a little bit more than that. Nice. Nice. Yeah. I'm kind of going to bleed this out a little bit. Let's get it coming out a little bit over here. Yeah, perfect. This is when I feel the most like Bob Ross, when I'm doing like the, yeah, just get a little happy fog, a little happy glow in here. This baker who's about to be like sent to his death, like, yeah, just a happy little red fog. Pedro says, have you painted the scene in Isaiah 6? I don't really get the symbolism, but I still really like it. I'm not biblically jacked enough to know exactly what scene that is, but if you tell me, I can tell you. I probably haven't. I haven't done that many biblical scenes on the show. So I probably haven't. Okay, I really like this red fog. It's kind of giving us a weird, it's kind of at once like comforting, but also a little creepy, so that's perfect for the symbolism. And I really like the idea I was talking about before where, like, you know, it's almost like the basket, it's like the ark, it's kind of like Marian in a way, like carrying this bread that like redeems us, and we're kind of like these black birds. Actually, I really kind of like that like theme of the picture. If I was to do this again, that's what I would kind of play up, I guess you could say. That's kind of like what the picture's about to me. That we're kind of like these black birds that come to feast on this life that's given like by death. You know, the baker is like sentenced to death by Pharaoh, but the birds get to eat the bread. You know, it's kind of like us, basically. We're like these birds. I get to be the woodpecker. Cool. Cool. Nice. Actually, I have one of my shirts is about that verse in Matthew. I wanted to put the Bible verse on it, but then I made it a little bit hokey. But I do have a picture of all these birds like gathered together in a ball, and I did it based on that Bible verse. Yeah, this looks dope. Nice. And actually, while it's still wet, I'm just gonna come in and put some Venetian red kind of smoke in there. Native of Space says, what's your overall take on Jordan Peterson? Although he says some things I agree with, my instinct's telling me to be very skeptical. Well, it's kind of like double-edged, I guess. I do think that for his area of expertise, I think he's really great, to be honest with you. For the domain that he normally occupies, which is like, you know, kind of like, I don't want to say getting your life on track. That makes it sound like so hokey. But he's like a cognitive psychologist. I think within the domain of cognitive psychology, it's really good. I think that a lot of his stuff was like distilled into like memes and it kind of became like a joke. But I think within that domain, he's really, really, really something for real. Like, I really do think that, I don't think it's like a fluke that, let's see, do I want to come in with the red smoke? Come on, be bold, be brave, let's do it. I'm just going to come in and kind of, yeah, perfect. That's a really good call. Yes. There we go. Sorry, I just want to make sure I don't kind of like fudge this up a little bit. Yeah, this is perfect. Also kind of frames the picture. You want a little bit of darkness on the outside that kind of like keeps the eye in here, but I also kind of want it to be like ambiguous. Like your eye is almost like, is that just the watercolor or what? Yeah, this is great. Okay, so yeah, I do think Jordan Peterson is definitely, what I was saying is it's not like a fluke that he, had this book that was so immensely popular and so many men like go to his, talks and stuff and like think he's really awesome. I don't think that was all a fluke. When he branches out into the religious stuff, honestly, what I really feel is like sometimes you can feel a little bit of like, what's really going on here? I think it's really because, I'm biased obviously, but I think it's because he wants to believe in God, but he doesn't. Like, you probably have seen interviews where someone will ask him like, oh, do you believe in God? And then he's like, well, no one can really answer that question because what does it really mean to, believe in God? First you have to ask yourself, what is believe? And, all this stuff. And whereas obviously if you believe in God, you're just kind of like, yeah, dude. Yeah, of course I do. So I think that kind of some of the Bible stuff and theology stuff is a little painful because he wants to believe in God, but he doesn't. That's my own personal prognosis. So yeah, if you watch his Bible videos, it's kind of that kind of symbolic consciousness where it's like reading so deeply into everything that you kind of can't tell if it's like meaningless or not. Like you can kind of apply this lens even to like a recipe where you're like, oh, this cookie has one egg. An egg is, the womb of life, and it has 1 cup of sugar. One is the symbolic wholeness and totality, and sugar is the sweetness of life's experience, but it's just a cookie recipe. So his Bible stuff is a little interesting. Not that it doesn't mean anything, but it's not really coming from the perspective of a believer. So I think that's why some people who are Christian kind of have like a weird response to it. But within his domain of cognitive psychology, yeah, I think he's really good in there for sure. Honestly, what I'm really hoping for is that he just becomes someone who actually believes in God. It sucks that he had to go through this whole crazy thing he went through with the drugs and everything, but that's what I really want for him, to be honest with you. That's what I want for everyone, but especially him. Like, how awesome would that be if he just came out of this whole experience of like, yeah, this made me realize that like God is real and like, all this stuff. That would be fucking awesome. Okay, let's see what else is going on in the chat. It's a scene with the Lord sitting on a throne, 6-winged seraphims, then a seraphim touches, Isaac when he gets the coal put in his mouth. No, I haven't painted that. I probably should. I haven't done a lot where they revolve around like figures and figures doing particular things, but yeah, I should do that. Okay, so this kind of wrapped itself up like they normally do. I was going to put a little bit of like yellow light coming off the bread back here, but I actually really like how this looks right now. And I kind of just, should I put the yellow in? I'm really torn. I can't tell if I'm being smart by leaving it as it is. I really can't tell. Having an indecisive moment on the stream. I don't know. I'm really feeling the red, brown, and black. But maybe a little yellow would be tight. You're catching me in a moment of indecisiveness. Let's do it. My instinct is actually telling me that I should just put a tiny bit, like almost an imperceptible amount of light coming off of it. And then we'll wrap this up. So yeah, we are landing the plane now. If anyone wants to ask me anything, you can ask me. Otherwise, though, we are going to land this bad boy very soon. Just like a little bit. I'm actually going to dry this up with the paper towel. That's how you know it's really just a little bit. So I'm going to dry it up, because I don't want it to be like too much. So you can do this if you're working with watercolor. You can just come back in and like dry it up. Yeah, that's good. Almost imperceptible. Almost imperceptible, but still there. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That was very subtle. I'm glad I got that like subtleness on the stream. Okay, and same deal over here. Just gonna put a little yellow down. Get some up by our little kiwi friend up here. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna dry it up so you can't tell. Just like a little bit. And you can get in a really powerful space when you're working with the subtlety of visual stuff. You can really trip yourself out. I've been in Photoshop literally sliding a slider back and forth. If you use Photoshop, it's all these sliders and stuff. I've been in there like, should I put it at 31 or 30? 31 or 30? And like sliding it back and forth, and then I'm like, dude, no one is actually going to really notice this. But maybe they will. Who knows? Okay, that was good. Yeah. Oh, man, I'm really glad I just nailed that. It's a very, very, very subtle change, but I think it really added something to the picture. So that was a really good moment there. All right, sick. Okay, so let's see. We'll wrap this up, talk about how it went. I'll see if there's any more questions in the chat, and then we'll wrap this up. Yeah, I mean, I always feel the need to recap at the end, but also like you were just here with me watching this, so maybe my need to recap is misplaced. But yeah, man, I think this looks awesome. I really was funny. It's funny because I really didn't know how the bread was going to come out, but that's almost like the best part. It looks sick. The black birds with the red. I'm kind of trying to keep pushing the color scheme. If you've been watching the show for a while, I have like color schemes I settle into, but I really never use the earthy colors that much like this, so I'm really pleased with how it turned out. The guy, the bread, this is perfect. Honestly, I'm really, really stoked about how it turned out. The different birds looks good. I thought the vultures would look weird because they were so small, but looks great, man. Me again, as I end every stream, me looking at my own picture. Wow, this is so good. What a great picture. But no, and then I really like also, I know I said it a bunch of times, but kind of the layers of symbolism, like the baker is a type for, the thief in the story of Christ's crucifixion, but also in a weird way, he like is carrying this bread that feeds others, so it's also kind of like a Christ thing. He's in the prison for 3 days, and then he dies, like Christ is entombed for 3 days. And then the birds, like I mentioned, they're kind of like us. They come to eat this bread, but it's foreshadowing the death of this figure. So lots of like interesting spider webby nodes of meaning that I'm really into it. I also really like this loaf of bread. It's a really nice color. So I'm really stoked you guys were here for that. So I'll take any questions that are here, and then don't wrap this thing up. This is a really good one. This one went really well. Okay. Got a few questions. Lucky Lizard says, do you think that there's been an intentional blending between real and artistic space? Luciferian breakdown of that distinction. Where do you think that line is? Oh my God, dude. Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I talk about Hollywood as like I guess you can call it, well, Jay Dyer wrote those books called Esoteric Hollywood, so I can't use that term because what he uses that term for is not what I'm describing. I guess you can call it like deep Hollywood. When you talk about like Hollywood as like a religion or a corrupting force, I guess you could say. I don't really know what term to use, but yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think that use of CGI in movies and TV, like whether or not it's intentional. When I say this, it's not like I'm saying like there's 4 guys in a room who are like, like we'll make it so every TV show has so much CGI that people won't be able to tell reality from fiction. I mean, that could have happened, maybe, right? But didn't necessarily happen. But yeah, I think that people living so much through movies and through TV, and then way more of those images are fake than you think. If anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, if you look for any video online that's like everything you see on TV is fake, it's all like green screened. I mean, that sounds really obvious, but everything in like most shows is green screened. Even if you see people like walking through the park, it's all fake. Not all of it, but often. And I think that by mixing those fake images in with reality, and people always think it's kind of like real, like whether or not, like I'm sure some people that would defend TV in Hollywood are kind of like coping, like, oh, well, I don't think it's real, like I get it. But like when you're watching a normal TV show and 2 people are sitting in an office, your mind isn't thinking like, oh, this is in front of a green screen. To at least a part of your brain, you're like, oh, this is real, and you interpret it as a real image. So yeah, I think that mixing those fake and real images together is a huge part of people like not being able to tell reality from fiction. And also like in a deeper sense, that's almost like symbolic of the real deeper reality, where by living through movies and TV and these exaggerated dramatic narratives, it's kind of like we cease being able to tell real actual life from our fantasies and from scripted dramatized versions of life. That sounds very like cliche, like kind of like boomer conspiracy, like boomer spirituality, like, oh, TV makes you dumb. But it's kind of hard to nail the exact subtle node that I'm getting at. But sometimes if you meet people, you can tell. Maybe you guys have had this happen before, but you meet someone and it's almost like they were socialized via TV, and it's almost like they have this piece of them that's like always like performing or not really engaging with life in like a real way. It sounds like very judgmental, but I came to this conclusion like reluctantly, so I'm not really talking shit. But basically, yeah, for sure, I think that the distinction between like fake and real, both in terms of lived life but also just pure visuals and pictures, yeah, I think that's like part of the agenda, whether it's like an intentional agenda or just spiritual warfare in general. Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. A lot of what we see is fake and we think it's real, both literally seeing and spiritually seeing. He seems more interested in analyzing the biblical stories. Just want to see him commit. Yeah, dude, tell me about it. You're talking about Jordan Peterson, obviously. Aaron Spry says, thoughts on gas station cooked food, suburban aesthetic or pseudo-nutrients? Dude, welcome to the hardest part of my aesthetic. You know that I live to eat a pound and a half of candy under a streetlight by myself in a parking lot off the side of the highway, but I also have to respect my body, but I do get the aesthetic of it. I can't tell if it's good or bad. I don't eat anything bad for me anymore. It sounds really pretentious, but I just don't. So I get the aesthetic. I'm working on my comic, which is all about like esoteric suburbanism. And the guy, the main character, actually works in a gas station, so there's lots of like shitty food aesthetic and stuff in there. So look out for that. The weirdest plug I've ever done. Nice. Timothy Dwyer says, looks great. Love the contrast of the white face to the blackbirds. Yeah, true. Yeah, it's the only like white thing in the picture actually, aside from up there at the top. Nice. I'm glad you like it. Thanks. Russell Graves says, can I buy this painting? Yeah, if you want to, man. You can hit me up on Twitter or email me. Sometimes people do buy the ones on the stream. So yeah, hit me up for sure. I can mail it out easily. I'm glad you like it. Someone said, I think this is the last one we'll take. It's the last one. I'm not cutting anyone off. Ambrose, great name, said, I have an Amazon gift card. Tell me a cool book to pick up. Whoa! Well, I mean, do you have Book of Symbols? You should definitely get Book of Symbols. Do I have it on the floor here? I would definitely suggest this. I've had this book for a heinously long time, and I look at it all the time. It's really, really, really good. It's called Book of Symbols, Reflections in Archetypal Images, published by Taschen. I would definitely recommend this. Is there anything else? Iconostasis by Pavel Florensky. That's how we started the stream off. This is really good. Those would be my two recommendations. If you want like a reading book, this is a really, really, really good book. That I highly recommend, even if you're not Orthodox. Obviously, it's really good. But if you want something that you're going to have around and like look at a lot, like it's almost like a symbolic encyclopedia, Book of Symbols. Those would be my two recommendations. And if you're not satisfied with that, you can hit me up on Twitter. Or get Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. It's kind of like the starter pack for the stream vibe in a way. All right, word up. It's exactly 9 o'clock. We finally did it. We landed on time. Nice. So cool, guys. That's basically it. I'm not going to recap this again, but I'm really stoked about how this came out. Thanks for watching this with me. Thanks for hanging out. Not just watching, you're kind of participating also. I love doing this, as you guys know. I look forward to it all day, every Tuesday, and some of the night before. And I think it's getting better. I'm getting better at like running the whole thing. I hope it's like getting more interesting and getting cooler, but I think we're in a good spot. And yeah, I really love doing this. So thanks for coming through. Thanks for all the work you do on your end, fighting the forces of evil, be they external or more importantly inside of us. Fighting the fight, running the race. We're all doing it together, guys. We're all doing it together. And we're going to win. And that's it. Thanks for watching the stream. Have a good night. And I will catch you guys on the internet where we all hang out together. See you later, guys. Thanks.